Tyler promised this trip would fix everything. 2 weeks in Europe. Claire, remember how we fell in love in Paris? He'd booked the tickets months ago, our 10-year anniversary gift to each other, though technically 3 months late because his work schedule had been impossible all summer. I'd spent weeks preparing. New luggage, travel-sized toiletries, outfits planned for every occasion from casual cafe mornings to evening walks along the Seine. I'd even practiced my rusty French. With a language app, after a year of growing distance between us, I desperately wanted to believe this could reignite what we'd lost. We arrived at the airport 4 hours early because Tyler insisted on having enough time for the lounge. International flights are unpredictable, he said, though I suspected his real motivation was the complimentary premium whiskey that came with his platinum status. I watched him check his phone repeatedly while we waited, smiling at notifications, typing rapidly with one hand. Work emergencies, he claimed, though his tech CEO status meant everything was supposedly an emergency. I need to make a quick call, he announced once we'd settled in the lounge, his carry-on positioned neatly beside the leather armchair. Back in 5 minutes. I nodded, sipping my complimentary champagne while pretending to read my novel, a romance about second chances, that now seemed painfully optimistic. When 5 minutes stretched to 15, I sent a text. Everything okay? No response. At 30 minutes, I called his phone directly, straight to voicemail. By the 45-minute mark, unease had blossomed into full anxiety. I approached the lounge attendant hoping for insight. My husband stepped out for a call. Has anyone seen him? Tall, gray suit, blue tie. Her sympathetic smile did nothing to ease my growing dread. I'm sorry, Mrs. Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds asked me to give you this when you inquired. She handed me an envelope with my name scrolled across it. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Claire? I can't do this anymore. The truth is, I've met someone who understands my ambitions in ways you never have. Eliza and I have been seeing each other for months. I've already moved my essentials to her place. Harrison will contact you about the divorce proceedings next week. Your ticket is still valid. Go to Paris if you want. Consider it a parting gift. Tyler. The words blurred as tears threatened, but I refused to break down in public. 10 years of marriage ended in a note delivered by a stranger while I sat in an airport lounge clutching a half-empty champagne flute. Mrs. Reynolds? A different voice, male this time. I looked up to see James Whitman, Tyler's business partner, standing before me with concerned eyes. Tall and impeccably dressed as always, he looked genuinely surprised to see me alone. Where's Tyler? Your flight board's in 20 minutes. I handed him the note wordlessly, watching his expression change. As he read, confusion giving way to shock, then anger. That absolute bastard, he said quietly, returning the paper. Claire, I'm so sorry. You didn't know? I searched his face for any sign of complicity. James and Tyler had built Reynolds Whitman Technologies together over the past 8 years. Surely he must have noticed something. No, he said firmly, though it explains his behavior these last few months. He hesitated, then sat in the chair Tyler had vacated. I'm on your flight, actually. Paris for the European Tech Summit that Tyler was supposed to attend. The announcement for our boarding cut through the ambient lounge music, impossibly normal, against my collapsing reality. You should still go, James said suddenly. I laughed, a hollow, brittle sound. To Paris? Alone? With a suitcase full of anniversary outfits while my husband moves in with another woman? Other woman? Yes. His gaze was steady, determined. Don't give him the satisfaction of sending you home broken. Take the trip, Claire. You've been planning it for months. I can't. You can. He checked his watch. Decision time. They're calling our rouse. Are you going back to an empty house to cry, or are you getting on that plane to Paris? The boarding announcement repeated, more urgent this time. Around us, passengers gathered belongings, moving with purpose toward the gate. I thought of our house, the carefully curated furniture, the photographs I'd need to take down, the bed I'd have to sleep in alone, the pity I'd face from friends who'd always thought Tyler was out of my league anyway. In one fluid motion, I stood and grabbed my carry-on. "I'm going to Paris," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. But not for him. James nodded approvingly, gesturing toward the exit. "After you, Mrs. Reynolds." "Claire," I corrected, squaring my shoulders as we walked toward the gate. Just Claire now. I had no idea what I was doing or what awaited me in Paris. All I knew with absolute certainty was that I refused to be the abandoned wife who slunk home in defeat. Tyler had chosen his path. Now, for the first time in a decade, I would choose mine, starting with getting on that plane. The gate attendant frowned at her screen, then at our boarding passes. "There seems to be a discrepancy with your seats, Mrs. Reynolds." I winced at the title that no longer felt like mine. "What kind of discrepancy?" "Your husband changed his ticket earlier today. He's no longer traveling, but he—" She paused, checking something else. "He upgraded your seat to first class before canceling his own." Her professional smile couldn't quite mask her confusion about the strange transaction. Of course Tyler would do that. A grandiose parting gesture designed to ease his conscience. 10 years together, and his solution was to throw money at the wreckage while he walked away. Classic Tyler. How generous of him, I managed, the bitterness in my voice making the attendant visibly uncomfortable. James, who had been silent beside me during this exchange, suddenly reached for his corporate card. "I'd like to upgrade as well. Same cabin section if possible." The attendant's fingers flew across her keyboard. "We do have one first-class seat available, Mr. Whitman. It's not adjacent to Mrs. Reynolds, but—" "That's fine," he interrupted, sliding his card across the counter. "And please seat any other passengers waiting for upgrades in my original business class seat." I stared at him, puzzled by his sudden decision. "James, you don't have to—" "Call it solidarity," he said quietly. "Or professional interest. I've spent 8 years watching Tyler make impulsive decisions. I'm curious to see the fallout from this one." The boarding process moved quickly after that. I found myself in seat 2A, a private pod with more buttons and amenities than seemed reasonable for transportation. A flight attendant appeared with champagne before I'd even settled in, addressing me by name as if I were a returning dignitary rather than a newly abandoned wife. "Mrs. Reynolds, welcome aboard. Can I take your jacket?" I handed it over without correcting her, too exhausted by the day's emotional whiplash to explain that I'd likely shed the name before returning to American soil. 3 seats ahead, I spotted James arranging his laptop and phone in his own first-class cocoon. He caught my eye and raised his water glass in a small salute that somehow conveyed both sympathy and encouragement. As the cabin filled with passengers streaming toward the main cabin, I tried to process the surreal sequence of events. This morning, I'd been packing final items, reminding Tyler not to forget his heartburn medication for all the rich French food we'd be enjoying together. Now I was alone in first class, my husband's final gift before he discarded our marriage. The absurdity of it hit me as we taxied toward the runway. I was flying to the most romantic city in the world without the man I'd been married to for a decade, accompanied instead by his business partner. A hysteric laugh bubbled up that I quickly disguised as a cough. The flight attendant appeared instantly. "Water, Mrs. Reynolds? Or perhaps something stronger?" "Scotch," I decided. "Neat. The most expensive one you have. If Tyler was paying for this upgrade, I might as well make the most of it." By the time we reached cruising altitude, I'd finished my drink and declined a second. Alcohol wouldn't solve anything, and I refused to arrive in Paris bleary-eyed and hungover. Instead, I removed my carefully packed travel journal from my bag. The beautiful leather-bound notebook I'd bought specifically to document our anniversary adventure. The first page already contained my looping handwriting. Tyler and Claire, 10 years, Paris revisited. I tore it out decisively, crumpling it into a tight ball before dropping it into the empty Scotch glass. Starting fresh with a clean page, I wrote simply, "Claire's Paris," then stared at the 3 empty lines I'd drawn underneath for listing trip. Goals. What were my goals now? What does one do in Paris alone when all plans had centered around rekindling romance with a husband who had already moved on months ago? The seatbelt sign dinged off. I glanced up to see James approaching, his tall frame navigating the spacious first-class cabin with ease. "How are you holding up?" he asked, gesturing to the empty seat beside me. The cabin was half empty, giving us privacy despite the open layout. "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted, vacillating between numb shock and murderous rage. He nodded as if this were a perfectly reasonable response. "I've taken the liberty of making some calls ahead to Paris. Tyler was supposed to attend several events at the Tech Summit, but obviously won't be there now. I assumed you'd handle the professional fallout." "I have, but there are also some adjacent events. Dinners, gallery openings, a private tour of areas in the Louvre closed to the public." He looked almost apologetic. "Tyler's status secured. Invitations meant for both of you. They're still valid." I stared at him, comprehension dawning. "Are you suggesting I attend Tyler's events without him?" "I'm suggesting you use every resource available to enjoy Paris properly, rather than hiding in a hotel room." His tone was matter of fact. "You can accompany me as my guest. No pressure or expectations, just access to experiences most travelers would envy." The offer hung between us, unexpected and tempting. I barely knew James beyond holiday parties and the occasional dinner when Tyler invited colleagues home. He'd always been polite, but reserved, Tyler's more serious counterpart in their business partnership. "Why would you do that for me?" I asked. Finally. Something flickered across his expression. Discomfort, perhaps, or hesitation. "Let's just say I have significant experience with failed relationships and ill-timed revelations. And nobody should experience Paris for the first time through a lens of rejection." "Second time," I corrected automatically. "Tyler and I met during study abroad. Paris, 2013. Then you already know the city has more to offer than memories of one man." He stood, straightening his impeccable suit jacket. "Think about it. No pressure either way." As he walked back to his seat, I turned to gaze out the window at the darkness beyond. Below us, the Atlantic stretched vast and unknowable, separating me from everything familiar. Ahead lay a city I'd once explored as a love-struck 22-year-old, seeing everything through the rose-colored filter of new romance. Perhaps it was time to discover what Paris looked like through my own eyes, not as Tyler's girlfriend, not as Tyler's wife, but simply as Claire. I reopened the journal, pen hovering over those empty lines beneath Claire's Paris. After a moment's consideration, I wrote, "See everything I missed the first time. Say yes to unexpected opportunities. Return stronger than I left, not the anniversary goals I'd planned, but perhaps the ones I needed most." Paris welcomed us with gentle morning light that gilded the edges of buildings as our taxi navigated from Charles de Gaulle toward the city center. I'd slept surprisingly well on the flight, cocooned in first-class comfort that felt both luxurious and isolating. Now, watching the suburban landscape gradually transform into the Paris of postcards, I felt the first genuine stirring of something beyond shock and anger. Anticipation. The patient. "Where are you staying?" James asked, scrolling through emails on his phone beside me. "Le Pavillon de Laurent," I replied, recalling the boutique hotel Tyler had chosen for its romantic courtyard and proximity to Place Vendôme. "Tyler made the reservation months ago." James looked up from his device. "That might be uncomfortable. Should we find you alternative accommodations?" The "we" caught me off guard. "I can handle checking into a hotel alone," I said, more defensively than intended. "Of course," he replied, unfazed by my tone. "I only meant the hotel might have arranged special accommodations knowing it was your anniversary. Champagne, flowers, other potentially awkward romantic gestures. He was right. Tyler had mentioned contacting the concierge to arrange anniversary surprises. The thought of facing heart-shaped anything made my stomach clench. I hadn't considered that, I admitted. James nodded thoughtfully. The tech summit put me at Le Burgundy. They'll have additional rooms. Completely different neighborhood, but excellent service and no expectations. The taxi driver interrupted, asking for clarification on our destination. James looked to me, eyebrows raised in question. 10 years of sensible decisions stretched behind me. 10 years of careful compromise, of considering Tyler's preferences first, of planning within the boundaries of his comfort. Where had that gotten me? Abandoned at an airport with a first-class ticket to nowhere. Le Burgundy, I decided, the unfamiliar hotel name tasting like freedom on my tongue. 30 minutes later, I found myself in a supremely elegant lobby surrounded by subtle opulence and the discreet efficiency of staff who appeared precisely when needed and vanished when not. James spoke rapid, fluent French to the receptionist, a skill I hadn't known he possessed, while I observed the other guests. Business travelers mostly, with expensive watches and purposeful movements. "You speak French?" I remarked when he returned with 2 key cards. "Raised bilingual," he explained. "French mother, American father. Spent summers in Provence with my grandparents." He handed me one of the cards. "You're all set, room 412. They've expedited the preparation since standard check-in isn't until 3. "Thank you," I said, genuinely grateful for his efficiency. "What happens now?" "Now," he glanced at his watch, "I have my first summit meeting in 90 minutes. You have a beautiful city waiting to be rediscovered." He hesitated, then added, "Unless you'd prefer company, I could reschedule my morning." The offer was tempting. The prospect of wandering Paris alone still felt daunting despite my newfound resolve, but I recognized the importance of this first step. "I think I need to do this part myself," I said. "But thank you." He nodded approvingly. "The hotel can arrange anything you need. I'm attending a private gallery opening in Saint-Germain this evening, if you'd care to join. 7 o'clock cocktail attire." "I'll consider it," I replied, not yet ready to commit but appreciating the option. My room exceeded all expectations, spacious by Parisian standards, with a marble bathroom larger than my first apartment and windows overlooking a quiet courtyard. I showered away the airplane staleness, then stood wrapped in the plush hotel robe, contemplating the suitcase I'd packed with such different expectations. I unzipped it slowly, revealing carefully chosen outfits for romantic dinners and walks, along the Seine with Tyler's hand in mine. A wave of grief threatened to overwhelm me, but I pushed it back firmly. I hadn't come all this way to cry in a hotel room. That doesn't mean the tears didn't come eventually. Sitting on the edge of that impossibly comfortable bed, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of Tyler's betrayal. 10 years of marriage ended with a note handed to me by a stranger. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. "Eliza and I have been seeing each other for months." How many dinners had I cooked while he was with her? How many times had I waited up, believing he was working late? I cried until my throat hurt and my eyes swelled, purging the shock and humiliation that had been building since I'd opened that envelope. Then I washed my face with cold water, reapplied minimal makeup, and changed into a casual outfit suitable for Parisian streets. The woman in the mirror looked wounded but resolute. The life I'd carefully constructed around Tyler Reynolds had imploded, but I was still standing. And now, improbably, I was in Paris. Alone but not abandoned, free to rediscover a city I'd only ever seen through the filter of being someone's partner. I grabbed my purse, journal, and the exquisite hotel umbrella provided thoughtfully beside. The door. Time to see what Paris had to offer the newly liberated Claire Chen. Paris unfolded before me like a familiar book I'd last read when I was too young to understand its deeper themes. I walked for hours, deliberately avoiding the romantic spots Tyler and I had frequented as college students. No Luxembourg Gardens, no Pont des Arts with its lovelocks, no cozy cafe where we'd shared our first Parisian kiss. Instead, I discovered a different Paris. I wandered through the less touristy sections of Le Marais, admiring architecture and watching locals go about their day. I found a small bookshop where the elderly proprietor recommended contemporary French novels available in English translation. In a tiny art gallery, I spent an hour studying the work of an emerging female painter whose bold use of color made my heart ache with recognition of something I'd forgotten I loved. By late afternoon, my feet ached pleasantly and my mind buzzed, with fresh impressions unfiltered through Tyler's preferences. I stopped at a neighborhood cafe, ordering in my rusty French and feeling unreasonably accomplished when the waiter responded without immediately switching to English. Sipping excellent coffee and watching Parisians pass by, I couldn't help wondering what James was doing at his tech summit. The unexpected ally in my Paris adventure remained a puzzle. Tyler's business partner, yes, but clearly a man with his own distinct approach to life. His offer to accompany him to the gallery opening tonight lingered in my thoughts. Back at Leurs, Burgundy, I found a handwritten note slipped under my door. The gallery opening begins at 7 now. I'll be in the lobby at 6:30 if you decide to join. No pressure either way. James. The considerate lack of assumption touched me. When was the last time someone had given me a clear choice without subtle manipulation toward their preferred outcome? I stared at my open suitcase, considering the evening attire I'd packed. The black dress I'd planned to wear to our anniversary. Dinner at L'Ambroisie seemed too laden with unmet expectations. Instead, I chose a deep burgundy sheath dress I'd originally packed for a less formal night, paired with the only jewelry I'd brought that hadn't been a gift from Tyler, a pair of hammered silver earrings purchased from a local artist back home at Écaille. 6:35, I stepped into the lobby, my stomach fluttering with unexpected nervousness. James stood near the concierge desk, checking his watch discreetly. When he looked up and saw me, genuine pleasure crossed his face without a hint of relief or impatience at my slight tardiness. "Claire," he said simply, "you decided to join us." "Us?" "A few colleagues from the summit might be there," he explained. "Industry people, not personal friends of Tyler's. I've already told them he was unexpectedly detained in Seattle." The kindness of this cover story, protecting my dignity while sparing me awkward questions, was not lost on me. "Thank you," I said, "for handling that and for the invitation." James offered his arm in an old-fashioned gesture that somehow didn't feel patronizing. "The gallery is a short walk from here, if you're not too tired from your day of exploration." The gallery occupied a converted 18th-century townhouse in Saint-Germain, its limestone facade illuminated by discreet lighting that highlighted ornate architectural details without veering into ostentatious. Inside, the space had been transformed into a minimalist showcase where contemporary art contrasted dramatically with original crown moldings and herringbone floors. James Whitman, a gallery assistant, greeted us at the entrance, consulting her tablet. "Welcome to Galerie Lumière." I half expected to be questioned, to have my presence challenged. "You're not Tyler Reynolds' wife anymore. You don't belong." But the young woman simply offered champagne from a passing tray and directed us toward the main exhibition. "The artist is Elise Durand," James explained as we moved into the first room. "She creates digital works exploring the intersection of technology and human connection. Rather fitting for a tech summit event." The pieces captivated me immediately. Large format, displays showing human figures composed entirely of binary code, their outlines shifting subtly as the numbers changed. One installation featured two figures reaching toward each other, their fingertips almost touching in a digital reimagining of Michelangelo's creation of Adam. "They're communicating," I murmured, noticing how the code flowed between the figures. "You see it," a woman's voice said behind us. We turned to find a slender woman with close-cropped silver hair and striking green eyes. Most people just see the aesthetic, not the conversation happening within the code. Elise, James greeted her. Fascinating work. This is Claire, he introduced me. Just Claire? She asked, offering her hand. Just Claire, I confirmed, strangely liberated by the absence of further identifier. Not Tyler's wife or even James's guest. Simply myself. Well, just Claire. What else do you see? She gestured toward the installation. I stepped closer, examining the flowing binary. The numbers aren't random. There's a pattern, almost like they're negotiating, Elise finished, looking pleased. Exactly. Each figure begins with its own distinct code pattern, but as they connect, they begin adopting elements from each other. Communication changes both parties. Her observation resonated uncomfortably with my current circumstances. Had 10 years with Tyler changed my core code? Had I negotiated away essential parts of myself to maintain our connection? Come, Elise said, breaking into my thoughts. Let me show you the centerpiece. She led us to a large room at the back of the gallery where a single installation dominated the space. A full-sized holographic couple dancing in slow motion, their forms composed entirely of scrolling text. This piece explores digital intimacy, Elise explained. The figures are constructed from actual correspondence between lovers. Everything from romantic Victorian letters to modern text messages, all anonymized, of course. I watched, transfixed, as the text-formed couple moved through their eternal dance, occasionally fragmenting into scattered words before reforming. It was beautiful and heartbreaking simultaneously. The fragmentation represents miscommunication, Elise continued. Moments where their words don't quite connect, creating temporary distance before they find alignment again. What happens if they never realign? I asked, the question escaping before I could censor it. Elise studied me with sudden interest. That's the risk in any communication, isn't it? Sometimes the fragments scatter permanently. James touched my elbow gently. Would you like another champagne? I nodded, grateful for the moment to compose myself as he moved toward a server. Elise leaned closer. New breakup? She asked with surprising directness. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's been there, she replied. Something in how you watch the fragments scatter, like you recognize the pattern. I considered deflecting, maintaining the veneer of being fine. But something about this strange Parisian night made honesty feel appropriate. My husband left me at the airport yesterday. Literally handed me a note saying he'd found someone else. Elise winced. Brutal. And yet you're here in Paris, at my exhibition. It was that, or go home to an empty house. You chose correctly, she said with conviction. Paris has healed more broken hearts than anywhere else on Earth. The city practically specializes in it. James returned with champagne, handing me a flute. Elise giving you the full artistic interpretation? Among other insights, I replied. She's quite perceptive. More guests approached, drawing Elise away with apologetic smiles. James and I continued through the exhibition, pausing before each piece while he provided context about the tech world's interest in digital art. Information that would have bored me 2 days ago, but now felt like a lifeline to a world beyond my collapsed marriage. As the evening progressed, I found myself introduced to various tech industry figures. Each interaction a small victory as I navigated conversations without Tyler's familiar presence. James remained nearby but never hovering, allowing me space to establish my own connections. Claire, a deep voice greeted me as I examined a smaller installation. I turned to find a distinguished older man with salt and pepper hair and intelligent eyes behind stylish frames. I'm Philippe Mercier. James mentioned you might be joining us for the private Louvre tour tomorrow. I glanced across the room to where James was engaged in conversation, wondering what else he'd mentioned about me. I haven't decided yet, I admitted. You must come, Philippe insisted. I'm curating the experience personally. Areas closed to regular visitors. Renaissance masterpieces without crowds. It would be criminal to miss while you're in Paris. His enthusiasm was infectious. The opportunity exactly the kind of experience that belonged on my new Paris list. In that case, how could I refuse? Excellent, he beamed, clearly pleased to have secured another appreciative audience. 10 tomorrow morning. James has the details. As the evening wound down, I found myself surprisingly energized rather than drained by the social interaction. Perhaps it was the champagne, or the stimulating art, or simply the novelty of engaging with people who knew nothing of my humiliation. Ready to head back? James asked as the crowd thinned. Or would you prefer a nightcap somewhere? The question held no pressure, just genuine inquiry about my preference. When had someone last asked what I wanted without subtle influence toward their own agenda? Actually, I decided, I'd love to walk for a while, if you don't mind. The night is too beautiful to end it inside. His smile held approval. A woman after my own heart. Paris deserves to be experienced on foot, especially at night. We said our goodbyes to Elise, who pressed her card into my hand with instructions to contact me when you're ready to discuss commissioning your own fragmentation piece to commemorate your liberation. Outside, the warm evening had cooled to perfect walking temperature. James offered his arm again, and I took it without hesitation as we strolled toward the Seine, the city's lights reflecting off the water like scattered diamonds. For the first time since reading Tyler's abandonment note, I felt something unexpected blossoming beneath the hurt and anger, a tentative curiosity about what might come next in this story I hadn't planned to write. Morning arrived with the gentle percussion of rainfall against my hotel window. I woke naturally without an alarm, feeling surprisingly rested despite the lingering effects of jet lag. For several heartbeats, I simply lay still, listening to the Parisian rain and cataloging the subtle differences from home, the higher ceiling, the distinctive scent of French laundry detergent on the sheets, the distant sounds of a city that had existed for centuries before my small crisis arrived on its doorstep. In this suspended moment between sleep and full consciousness, I reached instinctively for my phone to check messages, then stopped, hand hovering over the device. I'd deliberately kept it powered off since landing. Did I really want to know what awaited me back home? The concerned texts from friends who'd heard about Tyler's departure? The inevitable social media fallout? Perhaps even messages from Tyler himself attempting to justify his actions? Not yet. Not today. Instead, I rose and moved to the window, drawing back heavy curtains to reveal a Paris washed in gentle gray light and gleaming with rainfall. The weather forecast had predicted sunshine, but this felt more appropriate somehow. Not gloomy but contemplative, an invitation to experience the city's more intimate moods. I checked the delicate watch I'd brought specifically for this trip. 27. The private Louvre tour Philippe had mentioned wouldn't begin until 10 now. Plenty of time for a proper breakfast, and perhaps a brief exploration of the neighborhood in the rain. After a shower, I dressed carefully, selecting items I'd packed. For variable weather, slim black pants, a silk blouse in deep burgundy, a tailored trench coat. Professional, elegant, but not trying too hard. The woman in the mirror looked poised and collected, giving no indication of inner turmoil. It was a costume of sorts, but one that helped me feel anchored in this new reality. The hotel restaurant offered a breakfast spread that made American hotels seem positively barbaric by comparison. Flaky pastries still warm from the oven, local honey, perfectly ripe cheeses, and coffee that justified every French stereotype about superior café culture. I lingered over my meal, savoring each bite while watching Parisians navigate the morning rain with practiced nonchalance. Bonjour, Claire. I looked up to find James standing beside my table, impeccably dressed as always in a perfectly tailored gray suit that somehow complemented the rainy day. He carried a small package wrapped in elegant black paper. May I? He gestured to the empty chair across from me. Of course, I replied, surprised by his appearance. "I didn't expect to see you until the Louvre tour. I had an early meeting nearby," he explained, setting the package on the table between us. "And I wanted to bring you this before our museum excursion." I eyed the package curiously. "What's this?" "A practical necessity for Paris in the rain," he said, pushing it toward me. "Go ahead." Inside the sleek black wrapping, I found a beautiful compact umbrella in deep midnight blue with a wooden handle. Not a cheap tourist umbrella, but something of quality that would last for years. "I noticed you didn't have one yesterday," James explained. "And while Parisian rain is romantic in theory, it's still wet in practice." The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught me off guard. It wasn't extravagant or inappropriate, just a simple practical item that showed consideration for my comfort. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "It's perfect." "I hope you don't mind that I took the liberty," he added, signaling the waiter. "For coffee." I've traveled enough to know that small comforts make all the difference in unfamiliar circumstances. The waiter appeared with James's coffee and refreshed mine without being asked. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the rain create patterns on the window glass. "How are you feeling today?" James asked finally, his tone suggesting genuine interest rather than polite inquiry. I considered deflecting with the usual "fine," but found myself answering honestly instead. Strangely calm, actually. Almost detached, like I'm watching someone else navigate this situation. He nodded thoughtfully. "Shock has its uses. It creates a buffer while your mind processes. What's happened? You sound like you speak from experience." A shadow passed over his expression. "My wife left 3 years ago. Different circumstances, but similar enough." This revelation surprised me. In all the business dinners and corporate events I'd attended with Tyler, James had never mentioned a divorce. Then again, Tyler always dominated conversations, rarely allowing space for others' personal disclosures. "I didn't know," I said. "Few people do. We kept it quiet, mutual agreement to avoid corporate gossip." He sipped his coffee. "Tyler knows, of course. He helped me through the worst of it." The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler supporting his business. Partner through divorce only to inflict the same pain on his own wife years later. "I'm sorry," I offered. "Don't be. It was necessary, if painful. We'd become different people with incompatible visions for our lives." His gaze met mine directly. "The end of a marriage isn't always a failure, Claire. Sometimes it's just the natural conclusion of a chapter that served its purpose." The perspective felt simultaneously uncomfortable and liberating. I'd been viewing Tyler's abandonment purely as betrayal, which it certainly was in execution, without considering that perhaps our relationship had already completed its natural arc. "That's a generous way to look at it," I said. "Not generous, pragmatic." He checked his watch. "We should head out soon if we want to arrive at the Louvre on time. Philippe is notoriously punctual." Outside, I opened my new umbrella, its canopy creating a private sanctuary against the gentle rainfall. We walked in companionable silence, James occasionally pointing out architectural details I might have missed. A particularly beautiful doorway, an amusing gargoyle, a hidden courtyard visible through wrought iron gates. As we approached the magnificent facade of the Louvre, the rain began to ease, as if the city had decided we'd earned a reprieve for our morning expedition. Philippe awaited us at a side entrance reserved for special tours and museum staff, his enthusiasm evident even from a distance. Beside him stood a small group of perhaps 8 others, tech executives and their partners, I presumed. "Claire! James!" "Excellent timing," Philippe called, ushering us toward the group. "Everyone, please welcome our final participants before we begin our journey through Renaissance treasures." Introductions flowed quickly. Names and companies I recognized from Tyler's business discussions over the years. I braced myself for awkward questions about his absence, but none came. Either James had preemptively explained the situation, or these people were simply too polite to inquire. "Now," Philippe announced, producing a security card that opened an unmarked door, "we begin where no regular tourists go, the conservation laboratories, where restoration magic happens." As we followed him into the hidden workings of the world's most famous museum, I felt a flutter of genuine excitement that had nothing to do with my personal circumstances. This was the Paris experience I'd noted in my journal. Something unexpected and extraordinary that I might have missed if still viewing the city through the lens of anniversary romance. The professional detachment I'd maintained since the airport began to soften, allowing something new to emerge. Not healing exactly, but a tentative openness to the possibility that this unplanned journey might lead somewhere worth discovering. The private Louvre tour exceeded all expectations. Philippe guided us through restoration workshops where conservators worked on centuries-old masterpieces, their skilled hands bringing faded colors back to life beneath specialized lighting. We entered climate-controlled storage rooms housing works too fragile or obscure for public display. Renaissance portraits of forgotten nobles, mythological scenes from lesser-known artists, preliminary sketches for famous paintings. This sketch, Philippe explained, showing us a delicate drawing of a woman's profile, was Da Vinci's early concept for a subject that would eventually evolve into the Mona Lisa. Notice how the positioning changed completely. I leaned closer, fascinated by this glimpse into the creative process of a genius. The woman in the sketch looked outward, her gaze direct and challenging, unlike the final painting's mysterious inward focus. "I prefer this version," I commented, without thinking. "She seems more present, less enigmatic." Philippe's eyebrows rose with interest. "Many art historians would disagree, but personally, I find your observation compelling. The sketch shows a woman demanding to be seen as she is, while the painting transforms her into an object of eternal speculation." His validation of my amateur opinion sparked an unexpected warmth. When had someone last treated my perspective as inherently valuable? Tyler had a habit of subtly correcting my art interpretations, positioning himself as the more cultured observer despite my bachelor's degree in art history, a detail that seemed to resurface from some buried place in my memory. After the behind-the-scenes portion concluded, Philippe brought us into the empty museum galleries hours before they would open to the public. Standing before masterpieces without, crowds felt like a private conversation with history, intimate and revelatory. In these quiet spaces, James remained nearby but never hovering, occasionally adding insightful comments but primarily allowing me to experience the art directly. The other tour participants gradually gravitated toward us during breaks, engaging me in conversations that had nothing to do with being Tyler Reynolds' wife. By the time we emerged from the museum into midday sunlight that had replaced the morning rain, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd left some invisible burden among the ancient treasures. "Lunch?" James suggested, as our group disbanded with handshakes and exchanges of business cards. "There's a perfect little place nearby, unless you have other plans." "No plans," I reminded him with a small smile. "That's the current theme of my life." The restaurant, a narrow space with a zinc bar and tables spilling onto the sidewalk, offered simplicity elevated to art form. Perfectly prepared fish, vegetables treated with reverence, wine served without pretension. We secured a table beside open French doors, allowing the sounds and scents of Paris to become part of the dining experience. Over lunch, our conversation flowed with surprising ease. I learned that James had studied architecture before switching to technology, explaining his appreciation for Parisian buildings. He spoke of growing up between two cultures, American directness from his father, French appreciation for life's sensual pleasures from his mother. "Is that why you and Tyler work well together?" I asked, curious about the partnership I'd observed but never fully understood. "Your different perspectives?" James considered this while refilling our water glasses. "Partly. Tyler excels at seeing immediate opportunities, the quick deal, the immediate return. I tend toward longer-term considerations: sustainability, legacy, impact. The tortoise and the hare, I suggested. He smiled. Something like that, though. In business, you need both approaches. Tyler's urgency balanced with my caution created something neither of us could have built alone. The mention of Tyler's name didn't trigger the expected pain. Instead, I found myself viewing him more objectively, a skilled entrepreneur with specific traits rather than the husband who'd abandoned me. You never seemed to share his social ambitions, I observed, recalling countless events where James remained on the periphery while Tyler commanded attention. Accurate assessment, he acknowledged. Tyler enjoys being the center of every room. I prefer meaningful conversations on the edges, like the one we were having now, I realized. Throughout our meal, James asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to my answers about my abandoned art history career, my freelance design work that had gradually faded as Tyler's success grew, the travel I'd always wanted to do but had limited to destinations Tyler approved. I'm talking too much, I said finally, embarrassed by how easily I'd shared thoughts I'd kept private for years. Not at all, James replied. I'm learning who Claire actually is, beyond the corporate spouse role. I'm not sure I know myself, I admitted. It's been so long since I thought about who I am separate from Tyler and our marriage. Then Paris is the perfect place to rediscover yourself. He gestured toward the street scene beyond our table. The city practically demands authenticity. After lunch, we strolled along the Seine, pausing occasionally to examine offerings at the green bookstalls lining the riverbank. I purchased a vintage print of Paris from the 1920s, my first acquisition as just Claire, rather than one half of a couple. Near Pont Neuf, James checked his watch reluctantly. I have a panel discussion at the summit in an hour. Would you like to attend? It might be dreadfully boring. Blockchain applications and supply chain management. I laughed. Tempting as that sounds, I think I'll continue exploring on my own. Wise choice, he agreed. There's a small exhibition at Musée d'Orsay featuring female impressionists that might interest you more, given your art history background. The thoughtful suggestion touched me. He'd been listening when I mentioned my academic focus. That sounds perfect, actually. Dinner later? He asked. There's a reception for summit speakers at 8, followed by a dinner I'm obligated to attend. You'd be welcome to join, or we could meet after for a more relaxed meal elsewhere. The options he presented contained no pressure, no subtle manipulation, just genuine alternatives for me to consider based on my own preferences. Let's play it. By ear, I suggested. I'll give you my number so we can coordinate later. As James continued toward his conference and I headed in the direction of the Musée d'Orsay, I felt a strange sense of disorientation that had nothing to do with navigating Paris. The conversations we'd shared over the past day and a half had illuminated something I'd been too close to see: the subtle ways Tyler had shaped my choices, opinions, and even self-perception throughout our marriage. The art exhibition proved exactly what I needed. Works by Berthe Morisot, Mary Cassatt, and other female artists who defied convention to create on their own terms. I lingered before a Morisot painting of a woman reading alone in a garden, struck by the subject's expression of complete absorption in her private world. Afterward, I found a quiet cafe and, on impulse, removed my powered-off phone from my bag. Whatever awaited me in the digital realm, I felt suddenly ready to face it. The device came to life with a series of escalating notification sounds as messages, emails, and voicemails accumulated on the screen. 6 missed calls from my closest friend Rebecca, with increasingly concerned texts. Claire, are you okay? Tyler's. Being weird about where you are. Seriously worried now. Please call when you can. Okay. Tyler just told everyone you're taking space in Europe, which sounds like PR spin. What's happening? 3 voicemails from my mother, her tone evolving from confusion to anger as she'd apparently learned portions of the story from mutual acquaintances. Most revealing were the messages from Tyler himself, a progression that told its own story. Claire, I know you're upset, but this silent treatment is childish. Your mother is calling me. What exactly have you told people? Can we please handle this like adults? I've drafted a statement for social media that presents this as a mutual decision. Eliza. Thinks we should all meet when you return to discuss the house division civilly. The final message had arrived this morning. I've had my assistant arrange your return flight for tomorrow. This Paris tantrum has made your position clear. We need to start divorce proceedings before this gets messier. Each message revealed a man I hardly recognized. Controlling, manipulative, concerned with appearances rather than my well-being. Had he always been this person? Or had I simply filtered his behavior through the lens of love and commitment until it appeared acceptable? Set the phone aside, allowing Paris to envelop me in its timeless rhythm while I processed this revelation. The man I'd married, mourned, and measured myself against for a decade was someone I wouldn't choose now if meeting him for the first time, which meant perhaps that his abandonment, while cruel in execution, might eventually prove to be liberation, in disguise. I stared at Tyler's last message for a long moment, his presumption that I would obediently board whatever flight he'd arranged striking me as both laughable and infuriating. My finger hovered over the delete button before I caught myself. These messages were evidence of his character, worth preserving for whatever legal battles lay ahead. Instead, I typed a single response. I'll return when I'm ready. Do not make arrangements on my behalf. Then I silenced notifications from his number and composed a brief message to Rebecca explaining the bare essentials. Tyler had left me at the airport with a note about another woman. I decided to take the Paris trip anyway, and I was fine. Better than expected, actually. I promised details when I returned. To my mother, I sent something similar but firmer, knowing her protective instincts would translate to immediate demands for my return. Taking time to process in Paris. We'll call when ready. Please respect this space. With these minimal obligations addressed, I powered the phone off again and returned it to my bag. The brief digital intrusion had clarified something important. I wasn't ready to resume my normal life yet. The Claire, who had packed anniversary outfits and practiced French pleasantries, no longer existed. Whoever I was becoming deserved time to emerge before facing the aftermath of Tyler's choices, which meant I needed to extend my stay in Paris. I returned to Le Burgundy with renewed purpose, approaching the concierge with what I hoped was Parisian confidence rather than American hesitation. Monsieur Laurent, I began, having made a point to learn his name earlier. I'd like to extend my reservation. Is my room available for another week? He checked the system with practiced efficiency. Madam Reynolds, we can accommodate you through next Wednesday. After that, we have a previously booked group arriving. Perfect, I replied, presenting my personal credit card, not the joint one I'd shared with Tyler. Please use this for all charges going forward. Of course, madame. If he noticed the change in payment method, his professional demeanor revealed nothing. Shall I inform Monsieur Whitman of your extended stay as well? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't considered what James would make of my decision, or how it might appear given our developing friendship. No, thank you. I'll let him know personally. Back in my room, I surveyed the clothing I'd packed for what was supposed to be a 2-week trip, adequate for another week, though lacking variety. Shopping might be necessary, a thought that sparked unexpected pleasure rather than practical resignation. Paris shopping without Tyler's subtle commentary on prices or appropriateness seemed like a luxury beyond designer labels. I'd made my decision to stay, but not what to do about the dinner invitation for this evening. The Tech Summit reception would be filled with Tyler's industry colleagues, potential awkwardness I wasn't sure I wanted to navigate yet. Meeting James afterward felt like creating unnecessary complications in a situation already complex enough. My phone chirped with a text notification from a number not in my contacts. I opened it cautiously. Claire, it's Elise Durand from the B Gallery. I've had a cancellation for my private workshop this evening. Would you be interested in taking the spot, creating digital art therapy for new beginnings? No experience necessary, just an open mind. The timing seemed eerily perfect, a third option appearing precisely when I needed an alternative. I texted back immediately accepting the invitation, then composed a message to James explaining my decision to extend my stay in Paris and my evening plans with Elise. His response arrived within minutes. Excellent decision. Paris deserves more than a rushed visit. The reception will be tedious anyway. You've chosen wisely. Perhaps breakfast tomorrow instead? Relief washed through me at his easy acceptance. No pressure, no disappointment, no subtle manipulation, just support for my choices. The contrast with Tyler's controlling messages couldn't have been more stark. I spent the afternoon wandering the left bank, allowing intuition rather than guidebooks to direct my path. In a small bookshop, I discovered a collection of essays by expatriate women who had reinvented themselves in Paris throughout history. Artists, writers, entrepreneurs who had found their true identities in this city of light and shadow. I purchased it immediately, recognizing kindred spirits across time. Nearby, a boutique caught my eye. Not the famous luxury names Tyler approved of, but an independent designer whose window displayed clothing that looked both comfortable and distinctive. Inside, I found myself drawn to colors and styles I'd never have chosen under Tyler's influence. Vibrant patterns, architectural cuts, pieces that made statements rather than fading into appropriate backdrop status. "This is absolutely you," the shopkeeper declared when I tried on a dramatic blue silk blouse with asymmetrical details. "It complements your eyes perfectly." I studied my reflection, trying to see myself through unclouded perspective. The woman in the mirror looked more vibrant than the carefully curated corporate spouse I'd been, more authentic than the agreeable partner I'd become. I'll take it, I decided, and the black dress as well. By the time I arrived at Elise's studio, a converted industrial space near Canal Saint-Martin, I felt strangely liberated by my small rebellions, extending my stay, silencing Tyler's messages, purchasing clothing that represented only my taste. Each decision was a step toward reclaiming autonomy. Elise greeted me with double cheek kisses, as if we were old friends rather than recent acquaintances. Perfect timing. We're just setting up the digital interfaces. The workshop space contained 6 workstations with large touch-sensitive screens and various input devices. 4 other participants were already exploring the equipment with varying degrees of confidence. 2 middle-aged women chatting in rapid French, a young man with artistic intensity emanating from his entire being, and an elegant, older gentleman who looked slightly bewildered by the technology. "Tonight we create personal fragmentation and reassembly," Elise explained once we were all seated. "You'll use the system to construct a digital representation of something you're leaving behind, then fragment and reconstruct it into something new. Artistic skill isn't important. Emotional honesty is." She demonstrated the interface, remarkably intuitive despite its complexity. We could incorporate photography, digital drawing, text, even voice recordings into our creations. "Begin with an image that represents what you're releasing," she instructed. "A literal photograph or a symbolic representation." Without hesitation, I found myself searching through my phone for the professional portrait taken for Tyler's company website. The 2 of us perfectly coordinated in corporate-appropriate attire, my smile practiced and pleasant, his arm positioned possessively around my waist. "Now consider what elements of this image hold truth worth preserving and what needs to be released," Elise continued, moving between workstations to offer individual guidance. When she reached me, she studied my chosen image without judgment. The perfect couple, she observed. What do you wish to preserve? Just me, I replied with certainty that surprised me. The rest can fragment, she nodded approvingly. Then let's begin the dismantling. For the next 2 hours, I lost myself in digital deconstruction and rebuilding. Under Elise's guidance, I extracted my image from the photograph, then systematically broke it into digital fragments, pixels, binary code, scattered components of who I had been. Then came the reassembly, incorporating new elements, colors, that represented not who I was within my marriage, but who I might become outside it. The final image barely resembled the original. My recognizable form emerged from abstract components, surrounded by vibrant negative space rather than Tyler's possessive presence. Text fragments from my new Paris journal spiraled around the figure, forming a protective constellation of newly discovered truths. This is powerful work, Elise said as our session concluded. You've understood the core concept perfectly. Fragmentation not as destruction, but as necessary disassembly before authentic rebuilding. She helped me export the finished piece to my phone, then introduced me to the other participants who had created their own visual journeys. One woman processing her recent cancer recovery, another confronting retirement anxiety, the young man exploring his immigrant identity, the older gentleman honoring his late wife while embracing his remaining years. As we shared wine and conversation afterward, I felt a connection with these strangers that transcended language and background. Fellow travelers at various life crossroads, each finding our way through creative expression. Will you return to America soon? Elise asked as the evening wound down. Not yet, I replied with newfound certainty. Paris has more to teach me first. Walking back to my hotel beneath a star-scattered sky, I studied my digital creation once more, the visual representation of my decision to remain fragmented for now, neither rushing to reassemble nor allowing others to dictate my reconstruction. Timeline. Tyler had shattered the life I thought we shared, but perhaps in that breaking, he had inadvertently created space for something more authentic to emerge from the pieces. Breakfast with James became an unexpected ritual over the next 3 days. Comfortable morning conversations over perfect croissants and coffee that somehow never veered into uncomfortable territory. He maintained a careful balance between friendliness and respectful distance that allowed our connection to develop without pressure or expectation. On the 4th morning, as I described my previous day's exploration of Montmartre, he set down his coffee cup with sudden decisiveness. I have a proposition, he announced. The Tech Summit concludes tomorrow with a formal gala, typically boring speeches and mediocre food despite the expensive venue. He paused, watching my reaction carefully. Instead of attending, I've arranged something I think you might enjoy more. I'm intrigued, I admitted. What exactly have you arranged? A private evening cooking class with Chef Laurent Duchamp. He's an old family friend who runs a small cooking school in the 7th arrondissement. No fancy restaurant pretension, just authentic French cooking in his home kitchen. The thoughtfulness of the suggestion caught me off guard. During one of our earliest conversations, I'd mentioned my love of cooking and how Tyler had gradually discouraged it, preferring restaurant dining that showcased our social standing. That sounds wonderful, I said sincerely. But won't skipping the gala create problems for you professionally? James shrugged. I've made the obligatory appearances all week. One missed event won't damage Reynolds Whitman Technologies' reputation. A shadow crossed his expression. Though I suppose it's just Whitman Technologies now, at least temporarily. This casual reference to the company's uncertain future sparked my curiosity. What happens next with the business? You haven't mentioned it much. Tyler owns 51%, James explained. Controlling interest. I own 35%, with the remainder distributed among early investors. Legally, he remains in charge unless he chooses to sell. And will he? Eventually, I suspect. Eliza's family owns Meridian Software, our primary competitor. The relationship creates obvious conflicts of interest. The information landed like a physical blow. Tyler hadn't just found another woman, he'd aligned himself with their business rival's family. The betrayal extended beyond our marriage into James's professional territory as well. "I didn't know," I said quietly. "No reason you should. Tyler's been careful to keep their connection quiet until now." His expression remained neutral, but tension showed in his shoulders. Hence my extended Paris stay. Better to give him space to make decisions without my immediate presence complicating matters. For the first time, I considered that James's attentiveness might have motivations beyond simple kindness. Perhaps keeping close to the wife Tyler abandoned served some strategic purpose in their corporate chess game. He must have read the skepticism in my face because he added quickly, "To be clear, Claire, my friendship with you has nothing to do with business maneuvering. If anything, spending time with you complicates my professional position." "How so?" "Tyler has always been possessive. Even if he's chosen to end your marriage, he won't appreciate my friendship with you." His gaze held steady. "Which makes tomorrow's cooking class a personal choice, not a business strategy." Something in his direct honesty dissolved my momentary doubt. Whatever complex dynamics existed between James and Tyler professionally, his attention to my interests and comfort had been consistent and genuine. "Then I accept your invitation," I said, "though I should warn you I can be quite competitive in kitchen environments." His smile returned. "I wouldn't expect anything less." We parted after breakfast, James heading to his final day of conference sessions while I continued my self-guided Paris exploration, this time to the Musée Rodin, where sculpture gardens offered perfect contemplation space for my increasingly clear thoughts. Standing before Rodin's masterpiece, The Thinker, I found myself mentally composing an email to my boss at the design firm where I'd been working part-time. The position had always been a compromise, something Tyler approved of because it provided income without demanding enough time or attention to compete with his career or my social obligations as his wife. Now I realized I needed something more fulfilling. Not immediately, the divorce proceedings would demand attention first, but afterward, a complete professional reinvention felt not just possible, but necessary. I spent the afternoon in a cafe with my phone powered on, researching design programs and remote work opportunities. The prospect of rebuilding my career from scratch at 35 might have terrified me a week ago. Now it felt like an adventure waiting to unfold, challenging but exciting rather than overwhelming. When I returned to Le Burgundy late that afternoon, the concierge greeted me with his usual professional courtesy. "Madame, a package arrived for you." He retrieved a medium-sized box from beneath the counter. It was delivered by courier 1 hour ago. The sender information showed only James Whitman, no company name or return address. Intrigued, I brought it to my room before carefully opening the simple brown packaging. Inside, I found a high-quality chef's apron in a beautiful French blue shade, embroidered with my name in elegant script. Accompanying it was a small card in James's precise handwriting. "For tomorrow's culinary adventure. Every proper chef needs appropriate attire." The thoughtful gesture, personal without being intimate, considerate without being presumptuous, exemplified what made James's friendships so different from relationships I'd known before. He seemed to pay attention to details without agenda, to remember my preferences without using them as leverage. That evening, I found myself facing my reflection in the bathroom mirror with unusual clarity. The woman looking back at me had changed subtly but significantly over the past week, more confident in her posture, more direct in her gaze, less concerned with maintaining perfect appearances. My phone chimed with a text notification, Rebecca. Responding to my earlier update with enthusiasm about my extended stay and demands for more details about this James person who keeps appearing in your messages. Her protective curiosity made me smile, though I had no simple explanation for the friendship developing between James and me. Was it simply circumstantial connection? Two people thrown together by shared disruption? Was it rebound attraction, disguised as friendly support? Or was it something more authentic? A recognition between kindred spirits that might have occurred even without Tyler's dramatic exit. I wasn't ready to define it even to myself. For now, it remained a comfortable companionship that made navigating this unexpected chapter easier without demanding immediate categorization. The next morning dawned clear and perfect, Paris presenting its most photogenic self as if celebrating my continued presence. After a solitary breakfast, James had early meetings before the summit's conclusion, I visited Shakespeare and Company bookstore, losing myself among literary treasures until afternoon. In my room, preparing for the evening cooking class, I found myself reaching for the new blue silk blouse I'd purchased days earlier, the one the shopkeeper had declared, absolutely you. Paired with slim black pants and simple jewelry, the effect was undeniably different from my former careful corporate spouse aesthetic. More vibrant, less calculated, somehow more authentically me. The chef's apron from James completed the ensemble, ready to be donned once we reached the cooking school. I studied the final effect in the mirror, approving of both the external appearance and the internal shift it represented. James met me in the hotel lobby precisely at 6, his business attire, exchanged for casual elegance that somehow managed to look both relaxed and impeccable. His expression when he saw me contained appreciation without objectification, recognition of the external change that reflected something shifting within. "You look wonderful," he said simply. "Ready to master French cuisine? Ready to attempt it at least?" I replied with genuine enthusiasm, though I make no promises about my soufflé skills. The cooking school turned out to be Chef Laurent's actual home, a charming apartment with a professionally equipped kitchen where 4 additional students awaited our arrival. Introductions revealed a honeymooning couple from Australia, a retired British doctor fulfilling a lifelong culinary ambition, and a young French woman hoping to impress her future in-laws with traditional cooking skills. "James," Chef Laurent greeted us with exuberant affection, embracing James warmly before turning to me. "And this must be Claire. Welcome to my kitchen laboratory." His enthusiasm proved infectious as he guided us through preparing a traditional French meal from market-fresh ingredients, showing proper knife techniques, explaining flavor combinations, demonstrating the precise timing required for perfect results. James and I fell into natural partnership at our cooking station, his precision complementing my more intuitive approach. We moved around each other with surprising coordination, anticipating needs and sharing tasks without explicit discussion. Several times, I caught Chef Laurent watching our seamless collaboration with knowing amusement. "You've cooked together before, Non?" he asked during a pause while our main course simmered. "Never," I replied, suddenly aware of how natural it felt to share kitchen space with James. "Ah," Laurent nodded sagely. "Then you have the natural harmony. Very rare, very valuable." His observation hung in the air between us as we continued, preparing our meal, neither acknowledging nor dismissing the implied connection. By the time we sat to enjoy the fruits of our labor, perfectly seared scallops, herb-roasted chicken with seasonal vegetables, and yes, a reasonably successful chocolate soufflé, the comfortable companionship had deepened into something I wasn't quite ready to name. After dinner, we walked along the Seine, the city transformed by evening light and the gentle lapping of water against stone embankments. Our conversation flowed easily between reflective depths and comfortable shallows. Books we'd loved, places we hoped to visit, small life observations that revealed compatible worldviews, without demanding immediate conclusions. "Thank you for this evening," I said as we paused to watch a tour boat glide beneath an illuminated bridge. It was exactly what I needed without knowing I needed it. Sometimes the best experiences are the ones we never thought to want, James replied, his gaze on the water rather than on me. giving space rather than creating pressure. Like unexpectedly extended Paris sojourns. The gentle reference to my situation reminded me that our time in this suspended reality was limited. Soon, real-world complications, divorce proceedings, business restructuring, practical logistics of separated lives would demand attention. Yet something had shifted within me during this evening of shared cooking and conversation. The prospect of returning to face those challenges no longer felt daunting in quite the same way. Whatever awaited me back home, I would meet it as this emerging version of myself, more authentic, more confident, more aware of what I truly wanted from life beyond the boundaries Tyler had established. And perhaps most surprisingly, I would meet it knowing that authentic connection with another person remained possible, whether that connection with James evolved into something more, or simply remained a friendship that had appeared when most needed, I couldn't yet say. But for the first time since reading Tyler's abandonment note, I felt not just resigned to an unwanted future, but genuinely curious about what it might hold. Reality intruded the following morning in the form of an email from Harrison Daniels, Tyler's attorney. The message was clinical and direct. Divorce proceedings had been initiated, a preliminary division of assets was attached for my review, and my prompt return to finalize matters in person was requested. I scanned the proposed settlement over coffee in my hotel room, unsurprised to find it heavily weighted in Tyler's favor. The marital home, which I had spent 3 years renovating and decorating, was designated as his property with a generous cash consideration offered instead. Most of our joint investments would remain under his control, while I would receive what he deemed appropriate support during a transitional period. Generous, appropriate, transitional. Each condescending word reinforced what I now recognized as Tyler's fundamental view of our marriage, a convenience for him, a supporting role for me, with financial security offered as compensation for accepting my assigned position. I set the document aside without responding. My instinct to immediately accommodate, to avoid conflict even at personal cost, had been my default for too long. This time, I would consult my own legal representation before agreeing to anything. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Summit officially concluded. Celebratory freedom lunch? There's a place in Montmartre I've been saving for a worthy occasion. I hesitated before responding. The growing connection between us felt increasingly complicated in light of the official divorce notification. Was I simply replacing one man's influence with another's, seeking external definition rather than establishing my own boundaries? After careful consideration, I replied, Need a personal day to handle some legal correspondence. Rain check? His response came immediately. Of course. Take whatever time you need. I'll be writing post-summit reports in the hotel business. Center if you change your mind or want company later. The absence of pressure or disappointment in his message reassured me. Whatever else might be developing between us, James seemed to genuinely respect my autonomy. A stark contrast to Tyler's thinly veiled commands disguised as suggestions. I spent the morning researching divorce attorneys, eventually emailing Catherine Larson, a partner at a prestigious firm known for representing women in high-net-worth divorces. Her automated response promised a consultation within 24 hours, which would have to suffice for now. Needing physical movement to process my emotions, I changed into comfortable walking shoes and headed out without a specific destination in mind. Paris accommodated my meandering mood perfectly, offering beauty and distraction at every turn. I found myself in neighborhoods I hadn't yet explored, discovering small parks and hidden architectural gems that wouldn't make any guidebook. Highlights. In the 14th arrondissement, I stumbled upon a small art gallery showcasing contemporary female artists. The exhibition, titled Reconstructions, featured work by women who had reinvented themselves at midlife following significant upheaval. First-time visitor? Asked the gallery owner, a stylish woman in her 60s with a silver pixie cut and impressive statement jewelry. Yes, I admitted. I was just walking and found myself here. Ah, the best discoveries happen that way, she said with a knowing smile. I'm Martine. Take your time exploring. These artists all found their voices after divorce, career changes, or health challenges. The common thread is creative rebirth. I moved through the space slowly, each piece resonating with my current state of transition. A series of photographs documented a woman's physical transformation over 3 years following her divorce. Not just changes in appearance, but in the confidence evident in her posture and expression. Ceramic sculptures represented fragmented, then reassembled domestic objects, broken teacups and plates reconstructed with gold lacquer in the Japanese kintsugi tradition. This one speaks to you, Martine observed as I lingered before a mixed media piece titled Reclamation. The artwork incorporated torn legal documents, photographs, and house keys embedded in layers of paint and resin, creating a textured landscape of endings transformed into new possibility. It feels relevant to my current situation, I acknowledged. Divorce? She asked with European directness. In progress. Very newly, she nodded without pity. Karina created this piece during her divorce proceedings. The documents are actually pages from her settlement offer, transformed from instruments of division into components of art. She gestured toward a photograph of the artist. She's now one of Paris's most successful gallery owners. The end of her marriage became the beginning of her true creative life. The perspective shift felt like permission to view my current disruption not as an ending to be mourned, but as essential disassembly before authentic reconstruction. Thank you for sharing that, I said sincerely. We all need mirrors reflecting possibility rather than just loss, Martine replied, especially in transition moments. I purchased a small print of Reclamation before continuing my wanderings, eventually finding myself at a cafe where I ordered lunch and, on impulse, removed my wedding ring. The pale indentation it left behind would fade eventually, like the other invisible marks Tyler had made upon my life. Returning to Le Burgundy late that afternoon, I found a reply from Catherine Larson awaiting me. She could speak tomorrow morning via video consultation. Progress, at least on the practical front. More surprising was a small package waiting at the concierge desk, a book-shaped object wrapped in simple brown paper with my name written in now familiar handwriting. In my room, I unwrapped it to find a beautiful leather-bound notebook similar to but more elegant than my travel journal. Inside the front cover, James had written, "For the next chapter, your story deserves proper documentation." The gesture struck the perfect note between thoughtfulness and respect for boundaries, acknowledging my need for personal space while offering subtle support without intrusion. I took the new journal to the hotel's courtyard garden, finding a quiet corner where climbing roses provided natural privacy. The blank pages awaited my thoughts without judgment or expectation. Today, I received divorce papers and removed my wedding ring, I wrote, the pen moving across the first pristine page. 2 significant markers of an ending, yet somehow I feel more like I'm beginning than concluding. The words flowed more easily than expected, thoughts clarifying as they transferred from mind to paper. I documented not just events, but emerging realizations about patterns in my marriage, about the gradual surrender of self I'd accepted as normal, about the unexpected freedom found in this unwanted disruption. I don't know what comes next. I concluded after several pages. With the divorce, with my career, with James, with any of it. But for perhaps the first time in a decade, the not knowing feels like possibility rather than failure. The unwritten pages represent options, not emptiness. Empty. As twilight softened the garden's edges, I finally texted James. Thank you for the journal. Perfect timing and exactly right. Dinner in the hotel restaurant at 8? His response came quickly. I'll reserve a table. No summit talk, no divorce, discussions, no future planning required. Just good food and whatever conversation feels right. The parameters he suggested, present-focused without pressure to process past or future, offered exactly the balance I needed. Not avoiding reality, but not forcing premature conclusions either. When I entered the restaurant later, I spotted James already seated at a corner table offering both privacy and a view of the elegant space. He rose as I approached, his expression warm but carefully modulated, friendly without presumption. "Better day?" he asked as I settled across from him. "Different day," I clarified. "Processing rather than avoiding. Progress, I think." He nodded, understanding. "Processing beats postponing. I've tried both approaches." The conversation flowed easily through dinner, touching on books we'd both loved, favorite Paris discoveries, childhood memories that had shaped our perspectives, normal getting-to-know-you exchanges that somehow felt profound after a week of extraordinary circumstances. Over dessert, a shared tarte tatin that the chef had prepared tableside with theatrical flair, James mentioned casually, "I've extended my Paris stay through next week. Some potential European clients worth cultivating while I'm here." The information created both relief and complication. His continued presence meant our unexpectedly meaningful connection wouldn't end abruptly, but it also required me to consider what exactly was developing between us and whether pursuing it was wise given my newly transitional state. "I've been thinking about what happens when I return home," I said carefully. "The practical aspects of separation, the inevitable social awkwardness, the career decisions that suddenly have more urgency. Understandable concerns," he acknowledged. "Though perhaps not tonight's concerns necessarily?" "No," I agreed. "Tonight feels more about appreciating where we are than worrying about what comes next." His smile confirmed our alignment on this approach. "Precisely. Tomorrow will arrive regardless of how much we anticipate it." After dinner, we walked through the hotel's meticulously designed lobby toward the elevators, our comfortable silence, a shared acknowledgement of the day's emotional complexity. At my door, I faced the awkward moment that had been building since our first shared meal. The undefined territory between friendship and something more. James solved it with characteristic grace, briefly taking my hand and squeezing it once before releasing it. "Good night, Claire. I'm glad the journal was useful." "Good night," I replied, relieved and perhaps slightly disappointed by his restraint. "Thank you for understanding my need for space today." "Always," he said simply before turning toward his own room down the hall. Inside my suite, I moved to the window overlooking nighttime Paris, the city's lights creating constellations as meaningful as any in the sky above. My reflection in the glass revealed someone caught between identities, no longer the perfectly curated corporate spouse, not yet fully the independent woman emerging from that restrictive role. The space between identities felt uncomfortable, but necessary, a threshold that couldn't be rushed or bypassed. Whatever lay ahead, with the divorce, with my career, with James, with all of it, required me to complete this transition authentically rather than leaping immediately from one definition to another. I opened the new journal again, adding a final thought beneath my earlier entries. Perhaps the most valuable freedom isn't from something or someone else, but from my own expectations of having everything figured out immediately. The uncertainty itself might be the gift I never knew to want. The video consultation with Catherine Larson began exactly on schedule. A precisely framed professional woman in her 50s appearing on my laptop screen with the confidence of someone accustomed to managing complex situations. "Mrs. Reynolds," she began, then paused. "Or do you prefer Ms. Chen?" She'd done her homework, remembering my maiden name without prompting. "Claire is fine for now," I replied, appreciating the option to choose my own identifier. "I haven't decided about returning to my maiden name." "Understood. That's a personal choice entirely separate from the legal process." She adjusted her glasses, referencing notes visible on her desk. "I've reviewed the preliminary settlement proposal from Mr. Reynolds' attorney. Before discussing specifics, I'd like to understand your priorities in this divorce. The question caught me off guard. In the whirlwind since Tyler's abandonment, I'd been reacting rather than planning strategically. I haven't fully formulated my priorities, I admitted. Everything happened rather suddenly. Catherine nodded without judgment. That's not uncommon with infidelity situations. Let's approach this differently. Tell me about your contributions to the marriage. Financial, professional, domestic, social. For the next 20 minutes, I found myself detailing aspects of our partnership I'd never cataloged formally. How I'd scaled back my design career to support Tyler's business networking, managed our home renovation that had tripled the property value, cultivated social connections that directly benefited Reynolds Whitman Technologies, even edited the presentations that had secured their earliest major investors. This is excellent information, Catherine said, making notes as I spoke. Now tell me about assets you may have overlooked: intellectual property, contributions to his company, informal business advice, connections through your family or previous professional network that benefited Mr. Reynolds. Again, my response revealed patterns I hadn't consciously tracked. Design work I'd done for the company without formal compensation, strategic introductions I'd facilitated through college connections, even the branding concept that had become their corporate identity, sketched during a weekend getaway and casually implemented without attribution. Claire, Catherine said when I finished, her tone shifting from professional to personal. Based on what you've shared, the preliminary settlement Mr. Reynolds proposed significantly undervalues your contributions to both the marriage and his business success. I suspected as much, I replied, but wasn't sure how to quantify it. That's why you hired me, she said with the first hint of a smile. Here's what happens next. I'll prepare a comprehensive counteroffer that appropriately reflects your entitlements. This includes a forensic accounting assessment of Reynolds Whitman Technologies' valuation given your uncompensated contributions. The approach sounded both fair and considerably more assertive than I might have pursued without representation. Tyler won't be pleased, I observed. Divorce negotiations aren't about keeping the initiating party pleased, Catherine replied matter-of-factly. They're about ensuring equitable division of marital assets. Mr. Reynolds chose to end the marriage in a particularly inconsiderate manner. That doesn't entitle him to also dictate unfavorable terms. Her straightforward advocacy produced an unexpected swell of emotion. Not anger at Tyler, but gratitude for having someone clearly in my corner. What timeline are we looking at? I'll have a formal response to Harrison within 3 business days. I recommend not engaging directly with Mr. Reynolds about financial matters until we've established our position. She referenced her calendar. When do you return from Paris? Next Wednesday, I said, the date feeling suddenly concrete in a way it hadn't before, though my plans remain somewhat flexible. Perfect. We can meet in person the following day to discuss next steps. She paused, studying me through the screen. One personal observation, if I may. You appear remarkably composed for someone in the early stages of an unexpected divorce. The comment surprised me, both in its directness and its accuracy. Paris has been unexpectedly therapeutic, I replied. Distance provides perspective. Maintain that perspective, she advised. It's your greatest advantage in what can become an emotionally turbulent process. After ending the call, I sat quietly processing the consultation's implications. Catherine's approach, cataloging my contributions objectively rather than focusing on emotional injury, had clarified something important. My marriage hadn't been the supportive partnership I'd believed in, but neither had I been the passive beneficiary Tyler's settlement implied. My phone chimed with a text from James. Hope your consultation went well. Taking a walking tour of literary Paris this afternoon if you'd care to join. Completely understand if you need more personal time. The invitation arrived precisely when I needed productive distraction from legal considerations. I replied immediately, Literary Paris sounds perfect. When and where? Within minutes, we had arranged to meet in the hotel lobby, providing just enough time for me to change into comfortable walking shoes and grab a light jacket against the slightly overcast sky, promising occasional showers. James waited by the concierge desk, consulting a small booklet that turned out to be a literary walking guide. I thought we might explore the left bank, he suggested. Hemingway's haunts, the Shakespeare and Company bookstore, the cafes where literary giants argued philosophy, and art. Perfect, I agreed, genuinely enthused by the literary focus. I've seen Shakespeare and Company, but not with any historical context. We set out at a leisurely pace, James occasionally consulting his guide before pointing out significant locations. The apartment where James Baldwin wrote, the cafe where Hemingway borrowed money from Gertrude Stein, the hotels that housed struggling writers who later became legends. There's something powerful about creative reinvention in a foreign city, James observed as we paused outside a particularly significant literary cafe. So many artists and writers came to Paris to become different versions of themselves. Or, perhaps their authentic selves, I suggested, away from expectations and established patterns. He nodded, understanding my unspoken reference to my own situation. Paris has always excelled at providing beautiful backdrops for personal transformation. Is that why you've extended your stay? I asked, curiosity overcoming discretion. For transformation? James considered this as we continued walking. Not consciously, but perhaps. The company situation with Tyler creates complications I wasn't anticipating. Decisions that can't be rushed. Meridian Software, I said, recalling our previous conversation about Tyler's new partner's family business. The competitor connection, exactly. His expression tightened slightly. Tyler's relationship with Eliza creates potential conflict. Of interest concerns that impact company valuation, partnership agreements, everything. The business implications suddenly connected with my morning consultation. My divorce attorney mentioned a forensic accounting assessment of Reynolds Whitman Technologies. James glanced at me with newfound interest. Your attorney sounds thorough. Tyler may not anticipate that level of scrutiny. I believe that's the point, I replied, a hint of satisfaction in my voice. Catherine specializes in ensuring overlooked contributions aren't conveniently forgotten in settlements. Good, James said simply but with genuine approval. The company wouldn't exist without your early support. I remember the original branding meeting. Your concept sketch became our entire visual identity. The acknowledgement of my uncredited contribution meant more than I expected. You remember that? Of course. Tyler presented it as his concept, but I recognized your artistic style immediately. He shrugged slightly. I should have said something. Then, we all made compromises to accommodate Tyler's narrative, I offered, the observation applying to both business and personal dimensions. Our conversation paused as we entered Shakespeare and Company, its cramped interior crowded with literary pilgrims running fingers along spines of books in multiple languages. James selected a collection of Paris-inspired poetry, while I found myself drawn to a biography of women who had reinvented themselves in middle age. Appropriate reading material, James noted when we compared selections at the register. For both of us, I think. Outside, gentle rain had begun, prompting us to seek shelter in a nearby cafe. Over espresso and shared pastry, our conversation shifted from literary history to personal histories, childhood influences, university experiences, early career aspirations. Did you always want to work in technology? I asked, realizing how little I actually knew about James despite years of peripheral acquaintance. No, he admitted with a slight smile. I studied architecture initially. Technology was a practical pivot when my father's business faltered and tuition became an issue. But you maintain the aesthetic sensibility, I observed, recalling his appreciation for Parisian buildings and design elements. Some interests persist regardless of career path, he agreed. What about you? Was art history your original passion? Yes, with museum curation as the goal. I traced patterns in the condensation on my water glass, remembering ambitions set aside. Then Tyler's first startup took off during my final semester, and supporting his vision became the priority. And now? James asked, the question gentle but direct. Now everything feels possible again, I replied honestly. Terrifying but exhilarating. The rain intensified, drumming against the cafe windows and creating a cocoon-like intimacy in our corner table. Other patrons hurried in seeking shelter, shaking out umbrellas and creating a pleasant background murmur of conversation in multiple languages. I've been thinking, James said after a comfortable silence, about what happens when we both return to Seattle, the potential complications. Professional and personal, I acknowledged. Primarily personal, he clarified. Our friendship has developed under unusual circumstances. I've enjoyed it immensely, but I'm conscious of your vulnerable position. The direct acknowledgement of potential power imbalance impressed me, so different from Tyler's approach to relationship dynamics. I appreciate that awareness, I said carefully. I've been considering the same question, whether what's developing between us is genuine connection or simply a reaction to shared disruption. And? He asked, his expression open but guarded. I think it's both, I admitted. The circumstances created opportunity, but what's emerged feels authentic beyond the context. James nodded slowly. I've reached the same conclusion, which suggests that continuing our exploration once back home would be worth considering. With appropriate boundaries, I added, thinking of Catherine's advice about maintaining perspective. Of course. He hesitated, then continued. I respect where you are in this process, Claire. I'm not looking to complicate your transition or rush decisions that deserve careful consideration. The sincerity in his voice confirmed what I'd increasingly sensed, that whatever was developing between us had foundation beyond momentary convenience or rebound attraction. Let's agree to continue the connection once we're home, I suggested, with transparent communication about concerns and without artificial timelines. I'd like that, he said simply. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving Paris washed clean and glistening in afternoon light. We continued our literary tour, conversation flowing naturally between substantial topics and casual observations. By the time we returned to Le Burgundy hours later, something had shifted subtly, not a dramatic declaration or definitive commitment, but a mutual acknowledgement that whatever had begun in Paris deserved space to develop naturally beyond its borders. In my room that evening, I opened the journal James had given me, recording not just events, but emerging insights about what I truly wanted in this next chapter, professionally, personally, and in whatever relationship might be developing with James. Authentic connection. I wrote and requires neither rushing forward nor holding back out of fear. Perhaps the middle path is simply remaining present while allowing natural evolution at its own pace. That night, I slept more soundly than I had since Tyler's abandonment note. Not because all questions had been answered, but because I now trusted my capacity to navigate the uncertainty with growing confidence in my own discernment, 3 days before my scheduled return to Seattle, James received an unexpected invitation. We were sharing breakfast in the hotel courtyard, discussing my plans to visit Monet's gardens at Giverny, when his phone chimed with an email that visibly surprised him. Everything okay? I asked, noting his expression. Interesting timing, he replied, setting his phone on the table between us. Philippe Mercier, the curator who led our Louvre tour, is hosting a private reception tonight at his home in Montmartre. Apparently, several pieces from his personal collection are being donated to the museum. Sounds lovely, I said, unsure why this warranted such contemplation. James hesitated before continuing. The invitation specifically includes you. Philippe mentioned enjoying your art history insights during the tour and thought you might appreciate seeing his collection before it transfers to public viewing. The personal inclusion caught me off guard. I'd exchanged perhaps a dozen sentences with Philippe during the Louvre tour, none particularly revelatory about my art knowledge. That's unusually thoughtful, I observed, though I'm not sure what. I said that was so impressive. Philippe has excellent instincts about people, James said, and a notoriously selective guest list for home events. Being specifically included is quite the compliment. I sipped my coffee, considering the invitation. Will it be very formal? Formal enough to justify wearing something special. Casual enough that conversation matters more than appearance. He studied me with slight amusement. You're actually considering attending? I thought you might decline. Why would I? The question was genuine. Your previous reluctance about tech industry social events, he explained. I assumed this might feel similar despite the artistic focus. His observation highlighted something I hadn't fully articulated, even to myself. How different my response to social invitations felt now compared to the obligatory networking I'd endured as Tyler's wife. Those events never felt like genuine choices, I realized aloud. They were obligations where I performed a specific supporting role. This feels different. Because it is, James agreed. Philippe invited Claire, the art history enthusiast, not Mrs. Reynolds, the corporate spouse. The distinction resonated deeply. Throughout my marriage, I'd gradually surrendered my identity to become the perfect complement to Tyler's professional persona, the elegant, undemanding wife who made appropriate conversation without overshadowing his business objectives. Then, I'd be delighted to attend, I decided, though I'll need something appropriate to wear. My packed wardrobe didn't anticipate Parisian art curator receptions. Fortuitous timing for Parisian shopping, James observed with a smile. The reception begins at 8. I have meetings until late afternoon but can meet you back here at 7. We confirmed arrangements before separating for the day. James. To his business obligations, me to a sudden but not unwelcome shopping expedition. I began on Rue Saint-Honoré, where luxury boutiques offered beautiful but predictable options that felt too similar to my former corporate spouse wardrobe. After an hour of finding nothing that sparked genuine enthusiasm, I followed instinct toward Le Marais district, where independent designers created more distinctive pieces. In a small boutique with a minimalist aesthetic, I found it, a midnight blue dress with architectural details that managed to be both elegant and unexpectedly modern. The proprietor, a chic woman with dramatic silver hair, nodded approval as I examined myself in the fitting room mirror. C'est parfait, she declared. Sophisticated without trying too hard. You have excellent instincts. The compliment struck me as particularly meaningful, acknowledging my personal aesthetic judgment rather than conformity to external standards. As she wrapped the dress, I added a sculptural silver cuff bracelet that complemented the dress without competing with it. Walking back toward Le Burgundy with my purchases, I realized how rarely I'd shopped for myself based solely on my own preferences during my marriage. Tyler had subtly but consistently influenced my selections toward conservative elegance that wouldn't draw attention or challenge conventional expectations. The afternoon still stretched invitingly before me, and on impulse, I directed my steps toward the salon I'd noticed near the hotel. Without an appointment, I might not be accommodated, but the adventure of trying felt worth the potential disappointment. We have a cancellation in 30 minutes, the receptionist informed me after checking her system. A simple styling, perhaps. Or did you want something more transformative? The question hung in the air, laden with symbolic weight beyond hairstyling. More transformative? Wasn't that precisely what this entire Paris experience had become? Something new, I decided. I'm open to the stylist's recommendations. The stylist, Mathieu, studied my current style with professional assessment. the safe shoulder-length cut with subtle highlights that I'd maintained with minimal variation for years. "You have excellent bone structure," he observed. "We could create something with more movement, more personality, something that frames your face more deliberately." He demonstrated with his hands, suggesting a shorter cut with layers that would enhance rather than minimize my natural texture. "I trust your judgment," I said, surrendering to the experience with unexpected ease. For the next hour, I watched my reflection transform as Mathieu worked with confident precision. The result was undeniably more dramatic than anything I'd have chosen previously, shorter, more textured, requiring confidence to carry rather than designed to fade into appropriate background status. "It's perfect," I said when he finished, genuinely pleased with the sophisticated but distinctive style. "It suits you," he agreed. "Some women hide behind their hair. You were doing that before. Now your face is the focus, as it should be, the C." Observation felt strangely personal coming from a stranger, yet entirely accurate. I had been hiding, not just behind my hair, but behind careful accommodations and strategic self-effacement that had gradually diminished my presence in my own life. Back at the hotel, I had just enough time for a leisurely bath before preparing for the evening. The new dress complemented my transformed hairstyle perfectly, creating a cohesive impression of someone who made deliberate aesthetic choices rather than following safe conventions. James was waiting in the lobby at precisely 7. His business, attire exchanged for evening clothes that somehow managed to be impeccable without seeming rigid. His expression when he saw me contained genuine appreciation without objectification, recognition of intentional change rather than mere appearance. "You look wonderful," he said simply. "Thank you." I touched my hair self-consciously. I decided some changes were overdue. "The external catching up with the internal," he observed with unexpected insight. "It suits you perfectly." Philippe's home turned out to be a remarkable apartment near the top of Montmartre, with expansive views of Paris spreading below its wraparound terrace. Inside, museum-quality lighting illuminated artwork displayed with curatorial precision throughout the space. "James, Claire," Philippe greeted us warmly as we entered. Perfect timing. I was just about to begin informal tours of the collection for interested guests. The gathering included perhaps 30 people, an eclectic mix of art world, figures, museum benefactors, and cultural intellectuals. Unlike the tech industry events I'd attended with Tyler, where strategic networking dictated all interactions, these conversations flowed naturally based on shared interests and genuine curiosity. Felipe guided small groups through his collection, providing context about each piece's provenance and significance. When we reached a particularly striking modernist painting, he turned to me directly. "Claire, you mentioned interest in female artists during our Louvre tour. This Remedios Varo was acquired from her estate through a connection with my grandmother, who knew her in Mexico City. The personal history enriched my appreciation of the surrealist work, a dreamlike scene of transformation depicted through architectural and astronomical symbols. Her work explores feminine agency within constraining structures," I observed, the academic knowledge from my art history studies surfacing naturally. "Using architectural metaphors to represent psychological spaces." Philippe nodded appreciatively. "Precisely. She viewed creativity as a form of liberation from social constraints." Throughout the evening, he continued drawing me into discussions about various pieces, genuinely interested in my perspective rather than merely being polite to his friend's companion. The experience of having my knowledge valued in this context stood in stark contrast to the careful self-effacement I'd practiced at Tyler's business functions. "Your art history background is wasted on corporate design work," Philippe commented, during a quiet moment on the terrace, where we'd stepped for fresh air. "Have you considered returning to the field professionally?" The direct question about my career ambitions from someone who barely knew me felt both intrusive and refreshing. "Recently, yes," I admitted, though the path isn't entirely clear yet. The Louvre has an International Associates program, he offered casually. Professionals with academic credentials but experience outside traditional museum environments. Fresh perspectives are invaluable in institutional settings that tend toward intellectual stagnation. Are you suggesting? I began, uncertain of his meaning. Certain of merely planting a seed, Philippe clarified with a smile. Sometimes possibilities need only be mentioned to begin germination. My contact information is on the event program, should you wish to discuss further. The conversation shifted as other guests joined us on the terrace, but Philippe's suggestion lingered in my thoughts, a previously unconsidered option suddenly appearing on my horizon of possibilities. Later, as we mingled among different conversation groups, I observed James with newfound appreciation. Unlike Tyler, who typically positioned himself as the central figure in any gathering, James moved through the event with quiet confidence, listening more than speaking, asking thoughtful questions, creating connections between people with shared interests. Several times I caught his gaze across the room, our brief eye contact conveying shared appreciation for the evening without needing to maintain constant proximity. The unspoken understanding felt like partnership rather than performance, mutual support without dependency. As the gathering began winding down near midnight, Philippe approached us with a final observation. You two navigate social spaces remarkably well together, he noted. Independent orbits that enhance rather than restrict each other's movements. Rare and valuable in any relationship. The comment, delivered with European directness before he moved to bid other guests farewell, hung between us as we collected our things to depart. Philippe has always been perceptive, James said as we stepped into the cool night air, neither confirming nor dismissing the observation. And refreshingly direct, I added, equally unwilling to analyze the statement too explicitly. We walked for a while in comfortable silence, Paris at midnight offering its own particular magic. Illuminated monuments, quiet side streets, the occasional late-night cafe still hosting philosophical debates among students and artists. Would you consider it? James asked finally. Consider what? Felipe's International Associate suggestion, the Louvre program. The question contained no agenda, just genuine curiosity about my response to the possibility. I honestly don't know, I admitted. It's simultaneously tempting and terrifying, a completely unexpected direction. The best opportunities often are, he observed. Planned paths rarely lead to genuine discovery, says the man who planned an architecture career and discovered technology instead, I noted with a smile. Precisely my point. He studied me thoughtfully as we paused at a scenic overlook. You've changed since that first breakfast after the airport. Not just the external details, though those are striking too. How so? I asked, genuinely curious about his perception. You take up more space, he said after careful consideration. Not physically, but energetically. You're fully present in a way you weren't before, as if you were previously saving portions of yourself in reserve. The observation struck me with its accuracy. Throughout my marriage, I'd gradually reduced my presence to create space for Tyler's expanding ego, a strategic diminishment so incremental I'd barely noticed its progression until it was complete. I think I've been returning to myself, I said slowly, articulating the realization as it formed. Or perhaps discovering a new version altogether. Either way, it suits you, James replied simply. We continued walking toward Le Burgundy, the conversation shifting to lighter topics, favorite moments from the evening, artwork that had particularly resonated, the spectacular view from Philippe's terrace. At the hotel, we paused in the lobby, that moment of decision once again hanging. Between us, the undefined territory between friendship and something more, still requiring navigation. This time I made the choice, reaching for his hand and squeezing it briefly before releasing it. Thank you for including me tonight. It was exactly what I needed without knowing I needed it. The pleasure was entirely mine, he replied, his expression, warm but carefully modulated. Breakfast tomorrow? I'd like that. In my room, I carefully hung the new dress and placed the silver cuff in my jewelry case. Tangible reminders of choices made entirely for myself rather than to meet external expectations. The woman in the bathroom mirror, with her confident new hairstyle and direct gaze, looked simultaneously familiar and foreign, like reconnecting with a friend after long absence. Who are you becoming? I wrote in my journal before sleep. And what do you actually want in this next chapter? The questions remained unanswered, but for the first time in years, the uncertainty felt like opportunity rather than insufficiency. Open space for authentic emergence rather than failure to meet predetermined expectations. 2 days remained. Before my scheduled return to Seattle, 2 days to continue this Parisian exploration of self-discovery before confronting the practical realities waiting at home. Whatever decisions lay ahead, about my career, about the divorce proceedings, about James, about all of it, would emerge from this strengthened sense of self rather than from external definitions or expectations. Tyler's abandonment had initially seemed like the end of something vital. Increasingly, it felt like the necessary catalyst for something essential to begin. The email from Philippe Mercier arrived as I was packing for tomorrow's return to Seattle. Further to our conversation, he wrote, I've taken the liberty of arranging an introduction with Martine Dubois, Director of International Programs at the Louvre. She would be pleased to discuss potential opportunities with someone of your background. Her schedule permits a meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. if you're available before your departure. I stared at the screen, heart racing. Tomorrow's flight didn't leave until 3 p.m., making the meeting technically possible but emotionally complicated. Was I ready to explore professional possibilities while my personal life remained in such flux? My phone rang. Rebecca, my closest friend in Seattle, returning the brief update message I'd sent yesterday. Claire Reynolds. What in the actual hell? She began without preamble. You disappear to Paris after Tyler abandons you, then send me a 2-sentence text like you've just gone for coffee. I need details. All of them. Now. Her familiar directness made me laugh despite the circumstances. It's a long story. Then start talking. I've got wine and nowhere to be for the next hour. I gave her the unabridged version. Tyler's betrayal. James's unexpected support. My extended stay. The awakening sense of self I'd discovered in Paris. Rebecca listened with occasional expletive-laden commentary about Tyler's character and behavior. So this James person, she said when I finished, is that becoming something real, or just a Paris thing? That's the question, isn't it? I admitted, glancing at the clock. We'd arranged to meet for dinner in an hour to discuss exactly that. It feels genuine, but everything's happened in this bubble away from reality. And now you're coming home to divorce proceedings and empty closets, Rebecca finished for me. But with a hot new haircut and a potential Louvre connection, girl, your disaster is going better than most people's success stories. Her perspective made me laugh again. I wouldn't call it a disaster anymore. More like an unexpected redirection. Speaking of redirections, she continued, I should probably tell you what's happening on this end. Tyler's version of events isn't playing well. Turns out people don't approve of men who abandon their wives at airports with divorce notes. The information surprised me. He's actually telling people what happened. Not voluntarily. Eliza's brother works with Mark Thompson, who's married to Sarah from your book club. The story leaked. Tyler's been doing damage control, but it's not working. Even his mother called me asking for your side of the story. This revelation struck me hard. Evelyn Reynolds, Tyler's fiercely loyal mother, reaching out to my friend instead of accepting her son's narrative? The social landscape I'd expected to navigate upon return was apparently shifting without my intervention. There's more, Rebecca continued. Your mother-in-law mentioned something about Tyler's new relationship creating concerning business. Entanglements that Richard Reynolds is deeply troubled by, corporate drama of some kind. The business situation James had alluded to, Tyler's relationship with a competitor's family member creating conflicts of interest. The implications extended beyond our marriage into the company's stability. "Thanks for the intel," I said, genuinely grateful for this glimpse into what awaited me. It helps to be prepared. After we hung up, I returned to Philippe's email. The Louvre meeting opportunity took on new significance in light of Rebecca's update. The professional path I'd abandoned for Tyler's comfort was potentially reopening, not someday in an abstract future, but tomorrow at 10 a.m. if I chose to attend. I sent a simple reply to Philippe. "I would be honored to meet with Madame Dubois. Please confirm the appointment." His response arrived within minutes, confirming the meeting details and expressing pleasure at my decision. Decision. The word resonated as I prepared for dinner with James. My time in Paris had been filled with small choices that gradually accumulated into significant change, extending my stay, engaging with art again, reclaiming personal aesthetics through new clothes and hairstyle. But this, actively pursuing professional reconnection, represented a definitive step toward the future rather than just recovery from the past. James waited at a small restaurant overlooking the Seine, the setting sun casting golden light across the water. He'd chosen a quiet corner table that allowed private conversation without feeling isolated, another example of his thoughtful consideration. "You seem different tonight," he observed after we'd ordered. "More settled somehow." "I've made some decisions," I acknowledged, including accepting a meeting tomorrow with the Louvre's International Programs Director. His expression registered genuine pleasure rather than the calculation that would have marked Tyler's response to potential career complications. "Philippe works quickly. That's wonderful, Claire." "It's just an exploratory conversation," I clarified. "Nothing may come of it. But you're open to possibilities," he noted. "That's the significant part." The waiter brought our wine, creating a natural pause in the conversation. After he departed, I addressed the topic we'd arranged to discuss. "We should talk about what happens when we're both back in Seattle," I began directly. "With all the complications that involves." James nodded, his expression serious but open. "I've been thinking about that extensively. The situation requires clarity for both our sakes. Professional and personal dimensions," I acknowledged. "Let's address professional first," he suggested. "Simpler parameters. Tyler's actions have created significant business complications that will likely result in my buying his shares in the company. His relationship with Meridian Software's family creates untenable conflicts of interest. How does that affect me?" I asked, thinking of Catherine Larson's forensic accounting plans. "Your divorce settlement should include fair valuation of his business assets," James explained. "I've instructed our financial team to provide complete transparency to your legal representation. No games, no hiding value." The straightforward approach struck me as both ethical and practical, exactly what I'd come to expect from him. "Thank you," I said simply. "That will make things considerably easier." "As for the personal dimension," he continued carefully, "I value what's developed between us immensely. The connection feels genuine beyond these unusual circumstances." "I feel the same," I admitted, "but the timing creates complications." "It does," he agreed without defensiveness. "You're navigating a significant transition. I'm managing business upheaval. Neither situation creates ideal conditions for beginning something new." The pragmatic acknowledgement of reality felt refreshing after years of Tyler's tendency to reshape inconvenient truths to fit preferred narratives. "What would you suggest?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. James considered this thoughtfully before responding. "Complete transparency about intentions, with appropriate boundaries on timing. I would like to continue exploring this connection once we're both back in Seattle, but with explicit understanding that you need space to complete your transition independently." "No pressure for immediate definition," I clarified. Exactly. Genuine. Interest in continued connection without artificial timelines or expectations. He met my gaze directly. I'm not looking to become a rebound or replacement, Claire. What I value is the authentic person I've come to know here. Someone worth waiting for until circumstances allow proper exploration. The respect inherent in his approach, recognizing my need for autonomous completion of one chapter before potentially beginning another, contrasted sharply with Tyler's persistent attempts to direct my choices throughout our marriage. I'd like that approach, I agreed. Continued connection with appropriate boundaries and explicit communication. Relief softened his expression. I was hoping you'd say that. The conversation shifted to more immediate logistics, my return flight details, his extended business in Paris, when he expected to be back in Seattle. The practical exchange felt comfortable rather than restrictive, cooperative planning between equals rather than one person accommodating another's directives. As we shared dessert, a perfect tarte tatin that reminded me of our cooking class, James asked about my meeting preparation. Do you have appropriate materials for the Louvre discussion? Resuming portfolio access? I hadn't considered this practical aspect, having focused entirely on the emotional significance of the opportunity. Not really. My professional materials are badly outdated. I might have a solution, he offered. The Hotel Business Center has excellent printing facilities. If you updated your resume tonight, we could create professional materials before your meeting. The suggestion was practical without being presumptuous, offering resources without attempting to manage my presentation. That would be helpful, I acknowledged. Would you be willing to review it as well? Your perspective on current professional presentation would be valuable. I'd be honored, he said simply. We returned to Le Burgundy together, spending 2 companionable hours in the business center as I reconstructed my professional narrative, not minimizing my extensive art history background as I had during my marriage, but centering it alongside the transferable skills I'd developed through other experiences. James offered occasional suggestions about formatting and emphasis, but never attempted to reshape my fundamental presentation. By evening's end, I had professional materials that accurately represented my qualifications without either apologetic diminishment or overstatement. Perfect, he declared as we reviewed the final version. Authentically you, without unnecessary modifiers. Back at my door, we faced the familiar moment of undefined territory between us. This time, the conversation we'd shared created clearer parameters, genuine connection acknowledged but appropriately framed within our complicated circumstances. James solved the moment with characteristic grace, briefly taking both my hands in his. Whatever happens tomorrow, Claire, remember this. The woman Paris revealed was always there beneath the roles you'd accepted. Take her home with you, regardless of external outcomes. I will, I promised, squeezing his hands before releasing them. Thank you for everything. Alone in my room, I completed packing with methodical care, setting aside tomorrow's meeting outfit and organizing travel documents. When everything was prepared for departure, I opened the journal James had given me, recording not just events but the significant shift in perspective they represented. Tomorrow, I returned to Seattle, I wrote. Not as the abandoned wife seeking refuge, but as someone choosing her next chapter deliberately. The unexpected gift of Tyler's betrayal was the space it created for authentic reconsideration of everything I thought was settled. Whatever awaits, professionally with the Louvre opportunity, personally with the divorce proceedings, emotionally with the connection to James, I'm approaching from centered authenticity rather than accommodating adaptation. Tyler didn't just leave me at the airport that day. He inadvertently freed me from patterns I hadn't recognized were restricting my genuine expression. Paris didn't create a new me. It simply revealed who I've always been beneath the compromises I'd accepted as normal. I closed the journal, placing it carefully in my carry-on where it would remain accessible during tomorrow's journey. Not just a record of this transformative interlude, but a touchstone for the woman I was bringing home. The Louvre's administrative offices contrasted sharply with the ornate museum spaces, modern, efficient, more corporate than artistic. I presented my newly printed credentials to the receptionist, heart pounding with a mixture of nervous energy and quiet determination. "Madame Dubois is expecting you," she confirmed, gesturing toward a sleek waiting area. 15 days ago, I'd boarded a plane in shocked numbness after my husband's abandonment. Now I sat in the Louvre awaiting a professional meeting I hadn't anticipated, but felt strangely prepared for. The journey from there to here had been non-linear, but transformative, each unexpected turn creating space for authentic recalibration. "Madame Reynolds?" A striking woman in her 50s approached, offering her hand. "Martine Dubois. Philippe speaks very highly of your art history background." "Claire. Chen, actually," I corrected, the decision to reclaim my maiden name having solidified overnight. "I'm returning to my professional name." Martine nodded approvingly. "A fresh start, then. Those can be powerfully clarifying. Please join me in my office." For the next hour, our conversation evolved from formal interview to engaged professional exchange. Martine explained the International Associates Program, a network of art history professionals who facilitated connections between the Louvre and global institutions while managing specialized educational initiatives. "Your academic foundation is excellent," she observed, reviewing my materials. "Combined with your design experience and American perspective, you offer a compelling combination for our Seattle partnership." "Seattle partnership?" I repeated, uncertain I'd understood correctly. "Philippe didn't mention that detail?" She smiled slightly. "The Louvre is establishing satellite educational relationships with select American museums. The Seattle Art Museum is among our first partners. We're seeking a liaison with local connections and proper art historical credentials." The synchronicity seemed almost too perfect, a professional opportunity that leveraged my background while allowing return to the city where I needed to resolve my personal transition. "The position involves quarterly travel to Paris," Martine continued. "Initial training would require 3 months here, beginning in approximately 6 weeks if the candidate has appropriate flexibility." The timeline aligned remarkably with my anticipated divorce proceedings, allowing necessary presence in Seattle for immediate legal requirements while offering structured transition afterward. "This sounds like an extraordinary opportunity," I acknowledged. "Though my personal circumstances are currently in flux." "Philippe mentioned a divorce situation," Martine said matter-of-factly. "The Louvre has employed many professionals during life transitions. Sometimes structured, meaningful work provides essential foundation during personal rebuilding." Her perspective resonated deeply with my emerging understanding of what I needed, not just escape from my collapsed marriage, but purposeful re-engagement with my authentic professional identity. "I would be very interested in being considered," I said with newfound clarity. "Excellent. I'll need formal application materials within 2 weeks, followed by panel interviews via video conference." She handed me a detailed information packet. "Your background is extremely promising, Claire. I look forward to our continued discussions." As I left the imposing building, Paris sunlight illuminated the historical facade in sharp contrast to the modern offices inside, old and new coexisting in dynamic tension rather than conflict. The metaphor wasn't lost on me as I navigated toward Le Burgundy to collect my luggage before heading to the airport. James was waiting in the lobby, our agreed meeting point before my departure. "How was your discussion?" he asked, genuine interest, rather than polite inquiry. "Potentially life-changing," I replied, explaining the Seattle connection that created unexpected alignment between my personal needs and professional opportunities. "Remarkable timing," he observed as we walked toward the waiting car he'd arranged for my airport transfer. "Almost as if the universe conspired to create pathways forward precisely when needed." The universe or Felipe's strategic networking? I suggested with a smile. During the drive to Charles de Gaulle, we maintained comfortable conversation about practical matters. When James expected to return to Seattle, coordination regarding Tyler's business situation, logistical details that required attention without creating emotional complications. At the international departures entrance, the moment I'd been anticipating arrived, saying goodbye within the parameters we'd established the previous evening. No dramatic declarations or complications, just acknowledgement of meaningful connection with appropriate boundaries. Safe travels, Claire, James said, briefly taking my hand as he had the night before. I'll be back in Seattle within 2 weeks. I'll look forward to continuing our conversation then, I replied, the deliberate phrasing acknowledging our agreement. About future exploration without premature definition. His smile confirmed our mutual understanding. As will I. The flight home offered hours of suspended animation. Neither Paris nor Seattle, neither old life nor new, just transitional space. Perfectly suited for reflection. I opened my journal, recording not just the Louvre opportunity, but its symbolic significance in my evolving narrative. The position itself represents perfect balance, I wrote, requiring both roots in Seattle for necessary closure and wings. In Paris for expanded possibility, not an escape from reality, but a structured bridge between chapters. Later, as other passengers slept around me, I finally powered on my phone fully, not just for brief message checks, but complete re-engagement with the digital world I'd largely avoided during my Paris sojourn. Amid expected notifications, one email subject line caught my attention immediately. Richard Reynolds. Urgent discussion requested. Tyler's father, the senior partner at Reynolds Architectural Group and primary investor in Reynolds Whitman Technologies, rarely contacted me directly. The message was brief but direct. Claire, I hope this finds you well. Recent developments with Tyler's business decisions have created concerning situations that require discussion with all affected parties. I would appreciate meeting with you upon your return to Seattle, separate from any legal proceedings between you and Tyler. Please contact my assistant to arrange a convenient time. Regards, Richard. The corporate tone couldn't completely mask the personal subtext. This was Tyler's father acknowledging his son's behavior had created problems extending beyond our marriage into business territories. I forwarded the email to Catherine Larson with a brief note explaining my return date, then composed a polite but non-committal response to Richard indicating willingness to meet after I'd consulted my attorney. By the time we began our descent into Seattle, I'd addressed most critical messages, arranged temporary accommodations at Rebecca's guest house, and scheduled an appointment with Catherine for the following day. The practical foundation felt stabilizing rather than overwhelming, necessary structure for the transition phase ahead. Seattle greeted me with characteristic drizzle, the gray sky and verdant landscape a stark visual contrast to Paris's elegant, limestone and golden light. As the familiar skyline emerged through rain-streaked windows, I felt the expected anxiety rise but accompanied now by newfound confidence in my capacity to navigate whatever awaited. Rebecca stood waving enthusiastically at arrivals, her vibrant presence instantly reconnecting me to the support system I'd temporarily left behind. "Look at you!" she exclaimed, embracing me tightly before stepping back to examine my transformation. The hair, the clothes, Claire Chen 2.0 has returned from Paris with upgraded operating systems, I added, matching her lighthearted tone despite the significance of the moment. Her expression softened to seriousness. "For real, though, you seem different. More present, somehow." "That's exactly it," I acknowledged as we walked toward short-term parking. More fully present in my own experience rather than orbiting someone else's. In her car, Rebecca provided unfiltered updates on the social aftermath of Tyler's actions, the barely concealed corporate crisis at Reynolds Whitman Technologies, the awkward position of mutual friends, the surprisingly supportive response From Tyler's mother. Evelyn actually called me again yesterday, Rebecca reported as we navigated toward her Craftsman home in Queen Anne. She wanted to make sure you had appropriate accommodations upon return and offered their lake house if needed. The information stunned me. Evelyn Reynolds had always been cordially distant throughout our marriage, respecting me as Tyler's choice without particularly warming to me personally. That's unexpected, I managed. Apparently, Tyler's new relationship isn't meeting with parental approval, Rebecca explained with evident satisfaction, especially since Eliza's family connection to Meridian Software creates what Evelyn called untenable ethical complications for the Reynolds business interests. The external validation of concerns James had mentioned further confirmed the business situation's seriousness. Whatever personal reconciliation Tyler might have expected from his parents apparently wasn't materializing as planned. Rebecca's guest house proved perfect for my immediate needs. Private but not isolated, temporary but comfortable, close enough to necessary meetings while removed from former shared spaces. As we carried my luggage inside, the reality of my new circumstances settled fully. I was starting over at 35, rebuilding from foundation rather than simply redecorating existing structures. "You're going to be okay," Rebecca said, reading my momentary overwhelm correctly. "Better than okay, actually. You've got this." "I do," I agreed, the certainty in my voice surprising us both. As Seattle's distinctive skyline lights began illuminating against darkening sky, I opened the journal that had documented my unexpected journey from airport abandonment to purposeful redirection. On a fresh page, I wrote, "Tyler left me stranded at an airport with a first-class ticket to Paris, thinking he was ending my story according to his preferred narrative. Instead, he inadvertently opened the first page of a different book entirely, one where I hold the pen and write from authentic center rather than accommodating margin. Whatever comes next, professionally with the Louvre opportunity, legally, with the divorce resolution, personally with James and the connection we're carefully exploring, I'm approaching from integrated wholeness rather than fragmented adaptation. The journey that began with abandonment has arrived somewhere unexpected. Not at final destination, but at purposeful departure point for the next chapter, I'm now choosing deliberately. 3 weeks after returning to Seattle, I sat across from Catherine Larson in her sleek downtown office, reviewing the final divorce settlement. Rain streaked the windows, but unlike my arrival day, the gray didn't feel oppressive, just the familiar backdrop to a city I was rediscovering on my own terms. Tyler's team accepted our counter-proposal with surprisingly minimal pushback, Catherine noted, turning pages in the thick document. The forensic accounting assessment of Reynolds Whitman Technologies proved quite persuasive. "I suspect Richard Reynolds's involvement had something to do with that," I said. My meeting with Tyler's father had been unexpectedly straightforward. The distinguished architect had apologized for his son's behavior, acknowledged my uncompensated contributions to the company, and made clear that the family's priority was resolving matters quickly to address the Meridian Software conflict of interest. Richard's thinly veiled disappointment in Tyler had been more validating than any court could have been. "The house proceeds will transfer to your account next week," Catherine continued, "and the additional compensation for your uncredited design work gives you substantial financial independence." I nodded, still adjusting to the idea of receiving fair value for years of work I'd simply given away. "And the name change?" "Already processed. Legally, you're Claire Chen again." She smiled, closing the file. "Congratulations, you've navigated this remarkably well." Outside, I paused on the rain-slicked sidewalk, opened my umbrella, the midnight blue one from Paris, and took a moment to absorb the milestone. The divorce was finalized. The name I'd surrendered with such optimism 10 years ago was reclaimed. The settlement provided not just financial security but acknowledgement of my worth. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Free for celebration dinner tonight? James called asking if you'd be available after your meeting. James had returned to Seattle 2 weeks ago, our careful communication maintaining the boundaries we'd established in Paris, while gradually reintroducing our connection into real-world context. Tonight seemed an appropriate time to shift that boundary slightly. "Tell him yes," I replied, "and thank you for playing intermediary." I had one more appointment that afternoon, a final video interview with Martine Dubois and the Seattle Art Museum team. Last week's panel discussion had gone well, but today would determine whether the Louvre partnership would actually materialize. Back at Rebecca's guest house, I changed into the midnight blue dress from my Paris shopping expedition and styled my new haircut with growing confidence. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the shocked, abandoned wife who'd boarded a plane to Paris on desperate impulse. This Claire Chen stood fully in her own presence. The video call connected precisely on time, revealing Martine's elegant office and 3 Seattle Museum representatives I'd met in previous discussions. "Claire," Martine began without preamble, "we are pleased to formally offer you the position of International Partnership Liaison. Your credentials, perspective, and personal qualities align perfectly with our vision for this collaboration." The Seattle Museum director nodded agreement. "Your presentation on accessibility innovations was particularly compelling. We're excited to implement your ideas." Relief and satisfaction washed through me. "Thank you. I'm honored to accept." After confirming logistics, I would begin work in Seattle next week, then travel to Paris for 3 months of intensive training. In 6 weeks, the call ended with congratulations and genuine enthusiasm from both institutions. I sat quietly afterward, absorbing this final piece of my reconstructed life falling into place. The position leveraged my art history education, my design experience, and my newly rediscovered voice. The Paris-Seattle balance provided perfect symbolism for the personal transition I was navigating, honoring both where I'd come from and where I was heading. My phone chimed with a calendar invitation from James. Dinner at 7 Sao at a small restaurant in Pioneer Square, not one of Tyler's usual expense account establishments, but a place known for exceptional food and intimate conversation space. At the restaurant, James was already seated, rising as I approached. For a moment, we regarded each other. First meeting in real-world context since Paris, both acknowledging the shift from exceptional circumstances to everyday reality. "Look wonderful," he said simply. "Thank you." I settled across from him, struck by how his presence felt both familiar and new in this Seattle setting. "It's strange seeing you here instead of in a Parisian cafe." "Good strange or uncomfortable?" "Strange?" he asked with characteristic directness. "Good strange," I decided. Like we're finally testing whether what developed there translates here. He nodded. "I've been thinking about that too, whether our connection was circumstantial or substantial." "And your conclusion?" "That I'd like to find out," he said, meeting my gaze directly. "Properly, with appropriate timing and clear eyes about the complexities involved." "I received 2 significant pieces of news today," I told him, accepting the openness his approach invited. "The divorce is finalized, and the Louvre position is confirmed." "Congratulations on both," he said with genuine warmth. "Closure and beginning in perfect balance." "There's a third matter to consider," I added carefully. "Where you and I go from here." "I've given that considerable thought," James replied. "And I'd like to propose a framework." I smiled at the characteristic precision of his approach. "I'm listening." Dinner once a week. Explicitly not business-related, getting to know each other in normal context without pressure or timeline expectations. "That sounds reasonable," I agreed. "Professional boundaries maintained, personal connection, explored responsibly." "Exactly." He raised his water glass slightly, to clarity in complex circumstances. As we clinked glasses, I felt the rightness of this measured approach, so different from the rush into relationship that had characterized my younger self, so much healthier than the unconscious accommodation that had defined my marriage. Over dinner, our conversation touched on my upcoming work transition, James's progress buying out Tyler's company shares, and the unexpected freedom we both felt in rebuilding professional and personal landscapes simultaneously. "I've been meaning to ask," I said as dessert arrived. "What made you speak to me that day at the airport, when you saw Tyler's note?" James considered this thoughtfully. "I saw someone at an inflection point, a moment where support might determine which direction the story went. Having experienced my own version of that moment, I couldn't walk past yours." "I'm glad you didn't," I said simply. After dinner, James walked me to my car, the Seattle drizzle creating halos around street lamps. At my door, he took my hand briefly. "I meant what I said in Paris. Whatever develops between us, I value the authentic person you've become through all this." "That's the most meaningful compliment I could receive," I replied. "Because she's the person I value becoming too." Back at the guest house, I opened the journal that had documented my journey, finding a fresh page for this milestone day. Today, I closed one chapter definitively and opened another with clear purpose. I wrote, "The divorce is finalized. The career is launched. The new relationship is being explored with deliberate care." 4 weeks ago, Tyler's abandonment felt like the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I recognize it as the disruption I needed to reclaim myself. The space that opened when he walked away has filled with something far more valuable than what was lost: my own authentic presence. Paris was the catalyst, but Seattle is where the real work happens, building a life that reflects who I truly am rather than who someone else needed me to be. I don't know yet whether James will become a significant part of that life or simply the bridge that helped me cross from there to here. What matters is that I'm approaching the question from wholeness rather than need, from clarity rather than confusion. Tyler left me at an airport with a first-class ticket he thought was a parting gesture. He couldn't have known it was actually a boarding pass to a far better destination, myself. I closed the journal, set it on my nightstand, and turned out the light. Tomorrow would begin the first workday of my new position, the first Monday of my reclaimed name, the first step in a direction entirely my own. Outside my window, the Seattle rain continued its gentle percussion, no longer the soundtrack to abandonment, but the familiar rhythm of home, rediscovered on my own terms.